Chapter 733. Actually, they didn't. Lancelot shook his head and continued. When I caught up with them, they were already at the edge of the mountain. Immediately after, Lancelot explained to Wooming. Because Lancelot did not want to catch Chaldea's people, he went easy on them a little. In Lancelot's opinion, it was not a big deal at all. As a result, most of the refugees entered the mountain. Most of the refugees had already entered the mountain, but when Lancelot caught up with Gadotsi and the others, there were still many refugees who did not enter the mountain. Gadotsi and the others, who were at the back, did not enter the mountain either. Just as Lancelot was about to take down Gadotsi and the others and take this opportunity to show his goodwill, someone appeared to stop him. A green-haired girl with angel wings came from the direction of the holy city and attacked me. Hearing Lancelot's words, Wooming's expression became slightly subtle. Unsurprisingly, the green-haired girl was Azriel. Because Lancelot received the news that the refugees were intercepted halfway, he did not know what happened in the holy city, so he was very surprised by the green-haired girl's arrival. That was a servant. I could clearly sense it. Lancelot's expression became serious. That servant is not weaker than me. If we continue to fight, the possibility of me losing is very high. It was normal for Lancelot to think that he was no match for Azriel. Putting aside Azriel's age and combat experience, the Skywing race was a fighting race, a god-slaying weapon. In a melee, Lancelot might not be able to gain an advantage over Azriel. Moreover, Azriel was a mage. A sky strike was enough to make Lancelot suffer, not to mention other kinds of magic. I really did not expect that the Master of Chaldea would have such a strong person protecting him. Because of my fight with the green-haired girl, the Master of Chaldea took the opportunity to enter the mountain. After Lancelot finished speaking, he looked at Wooming. He felt that Wooming seemed to have something to say from the start. Sir Villo, do you have something to say? Lancelot asked, puzzled. No, a little bit. Wooming shook his head, then paused and nodded. It's better not to explain too much to Lancelot. Of course, this didn't mean that Wooming was prepared to hide everything. He would still tell Wooming about his relationship with Chaldea. By the way, Lancelot, do you know that I'm actually quite close to Chaldea? Wooming's revelation made Lancelot's eyes widen. Really, Lord Villo, you've already established a good relationship with the Master of Chaldea? It seems like my actions were unnecessary. Lancelot shook his head in self-mockery. Wooming wasn't bothered by Lancelot's self-mockery. Then, Wooming continued, You should know that Galahad is the servant of Master Chaldea. Nay, suddenly, the black horse under Lancelot let out a blood-curdling screech. Wooming looked over and saw that Lancelot's body had tensed up. This made Lancelot's legs exert a lot of strength. The powerful leg force caused a lot of pressure on the black horse's abdomen, causing the black horse to neigh. Hey, Sir Lancelot, your mount can't stand your strength. Be careful. Wooming immediately reminded. I'm sorry, Sir Villo. I made a fool of myself. Lancelot's tensed body immediately relaxed. The former, I'm sorry, was said to his mount, and the latter was said to Wooming. Although it couldn't be compared to his mount when he was alive, this black horse had accompanied Lancelot for a long time. Lancelot also had some feelings for this black horse. Look at you. You don't seem to know that Galahad is the servant of Master Chaldea. Wooming's words made Lancelot feel awkward. I really don't know. Lancelot replied rather awkwardly. Although Lancelot had caught up with Gadotsi and the others because of Azriel's interception, Lancelot didn't really meet with Gadotsi and even Matthew. He also didn't know that the person Galahad possessed was Matthew. Now that Wooming said this, Lancelot was shocked. That, Sir Villo, although I didn't have close contact with Master Chaldea, I saw Chaldea's group in the distance. It seems that my son isn't among them. This was true. Lancelot had caught up with Gadotsi and the others. Although he didn't do anything, Lancelot glanced at Chaldea's group from a distance. However, because the distance was too far, Lancelot couldn't effectively perceive Galahad's aura, and Lancelot didn't find his son, so he didn't pay attention. It's normal that you didn't notice because Galahad had given its power to a girl and then fell into a deep sleep. I see. Is it a demi-servant? Lancelot nodded. After all, he was also a regular servant. He still understood the operation of possessing others and falling into a deep sleep after handing over power. But, Lancelot, you don't seem to know anything. Wu Ming cast a strange look at Lancelot. Just from the fact that Lancelot didn't know that Wu Ming had been to the Holy City, it was enough to see that Lancelot's information was slightly outdated, not to mention that Lancelot also had a lot of mistakes in other aspects. This can't be helped. Lancelot smiled helplessly and shook his head. After all, Agruman doesn't like me very much. Compared to the betrayal of others, in Agruman's eyes, Lancelot's betrayal was more shameful, so he was quite displeased with Lancelot. Not to mention that Lancelot himself also asked to stay outside the Holy City, which was what Agruman wanted. In other information, Agruman even deliberately withheld information and deliberately didn't tell Lancelot. Just like Wu Ming's matter, Agruman deliberately didn't tell Lancelot. After all, Lancelot, as a guerrilla knight, ran around all day and basically didn't need any information, so Agruman simply chose not to tell Lancelot. The order to intercept Gadotsi and the others was given to him by Egwene when he found out that Lancelot was in the vicinity of the Holy City, and he chose to attack. Before that, Lancelot didn't even know that Chaldea's people had come here. He only knew that Chaldea would come. You are really pitiful. Wu Ming helplessly shook his head. I don't feel pitiful, Agruman, doing this. I also feel that I am peaceful. After all, there were no complicated orders, which was also beneficial for Lancelot to find Wu Ming. Although now he found him, and also found his son. Wait a minute. Lancelot stopped the horse. My son seems to have become a daughter? Chapter 734. That's true, but whether the other party recognizes you as his father or not is another matter. Wu Ming attacked mercilessly. Wu Ming was not very familiar with Matthew, but he was not a stranger either. In Wu Ming's opinion, Matthew was not the kind of child who would casually recognize others as his father, but this was not certain. After all, Matthew's spirit base belonged to Galahad, and refugees would be affected. Lancelot fell into a deep silence. Unlike Wu Ming, Lancelot thought that he had a good relationship with Galahad. But because of this, Lancelot could clearly realize that Galahad was actually very strict with him as a father. When the king went astray, he did not intervene in time. Instead, he let the king go and even joined the king on the wrong path. With what he was doing now, he was afraid that Galahad would not recognize him. After all, Galahad had obtained the Holy Grail and was known as the Holy Grail Knight. Even if there were other secrets, it could not cover up Lancelot's mistake. Even if Matthew was not the real Galahad and was only possessed by Galahad, Galahad's feelings for him were likely to affect Matthew. Therefore, in Lancelot's opinion, his daughter, son, might be quite angry, and it was also very likely that they would not recognize him as their father. Don't be so negative. If you admit your mistake, I think Galahad, or Matthew, will forgive you. Wu Ming smiled and patted Lancelot on the shoulder. However, Lancelot just sighed and lowered his head helplessly. I hope so. During this conversation, they almost reached Lancelot's base. This place is very remote. Looking at the house with a sharp corner surrounded by the hills in front of him, Wu Ming, who was walking all the way, commented, "When I was looking for you in the wilderness, I accidentally found this secluded place," Lancelot explained. But there was one thing that Wu Ming was quite puzzled. This shouldn't be your base outside the Holy City, right? Wu Ming didn't mean anything else. He just felt that this place didn't look like a base for the external knights of the Holy City. Even if it wasn't on the plains, it had to be built in a terrain that fit the style of a knight. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to get past Egwene. Words like, "You're not fit to be my king's knight," "It's not proper to be an outpost of the Holy City in such a secluded place," and so on would definitely be used by Egwene. If it was Egwene, he would definitely say something like that. Moreover, he would be suspected of targeting Lancelot. That was why Wu Ming said that this place didn't look like an outpost of the Holy City, but more like a hidden secret base. Is that what you want to say, Lord Villo? Wu Ming nodded. There was no other reason other than this place was too advantageous as a secret base. Indeed, this is not where my troops are stationed, Lancelot explained to Wooming. Oh, could it be that it's really as I guessed? Wooming's interest was piqued. Although he was suspicious, it was just a guess. Did he get right? Lancelot didn't say much. He just nodded slightly and then signaled the knights behind him to go ahead first. The knights behind Lancelot responded and accelerated in unison. They rushed from both sides of Lancelot and Wooming towards the base that was surrounded by many low hills. After the knights left, Wooming and Lancelot rode their horses and slowly walked forward. Lord Villo, as you know, I don't agree with my king's way of doing things, Lancelot began to explain to Wooming. Lancelot just couldn't betray Artoria again, so he chose to side with her. In other words, it was reasonable that Lancelot disagreed with Artoria's way of doing things. If I meet refugees in the wild, I'll protect them without the knowledge of the other knights of the Round Table and my king. In front of us is the place where the refugees live. Lancelot was indeed the hesitant Lancelot. Although he chose to side with Artoria, he still chose to do some dirty tricks in private. Of course, it was a dirty trick for the Holy City, but in Wooming's eyes, Lancelot did a good job. Good job, Lancelot. If Galahad knows about this, he'll definitely be impressed. Lancelot accepted Wooming's compliment. I've been on the wrong path. Even if I were to do it again, I wouldn't do it exactly the same way. Lancelot meant that even if he chose to side with Artoria, he wouldn't kill the refugees unless it was Artoria's order. Compared to Gawain and the others who were rigid, Lancelot was more flexible. As a knight, he couldn't betray Artoria again, but he would save the refugees in private. There was no doubt that Lancelot, who was on the Lion King's side, was cleared up a lot. Of course, Lancelot also had a little selfish motive. In order not to disappoint his son, as a father, Lancelot naturally had to take action. Now that his son had become a daughter, Lancelot believed that he had to work harder. The soul of daughter control, burn, asterisk cough, asterisk. Let's go and see this secret base of yours. Ignoring Lancelot's soul of daughter control burning face, Wooming urged his horse to speed up. Seeing Wooming speeding up, Lancelot, who realized what was going on, also sped up his horse to catch up with Wooming. A moment later, the scene of a post-disaster camp appeared in front of Wooming's eyes. Simple tent-like houses made of unknown materials were arranged in an orderly manner in the valley, surrounded by hills. Wooming could see that these tent-like houses looked simple, but they were quite sturdy. At the very least, they could completely block the rain, snow, and hail. I've arranged knights to patrol the entrance and the hills. Plus, the terrain here is remote, so it can be used as a shelter for the refugees. Lancelot did a good job. There were patrolling knights around the camp, responsible for security. There were also many ordinary people walking between the tent-like houses. Judging from their clothes, they were indeed refugees. The refugees all had smiles on their faces. Although they were trying to find joy in the midst of hardship, their smiles were not fake. Because it was the Middle East, water was relatively scarce. However, Wooming unexpectedly saw a rather simple well in the corner. Chapter 735. These refugees found it by accident, Lancelot explained. After all, Lancelot was a knight and not an expert in water conservancy. Naturally, he could not find a water source in this secret base. As natives of the Middle East, although it was not their specialty, these refugees naturally had some ways to find a water source. However, they did not expect there to be a water source here. Therefore, an extremely simple well was created. It had to be said that these refugees were really lucky to be rescued in a chaotic world. Not only did they have a safe place to live, but they also had a water source. As for food, Lancelot would regularly bring his knights to deliver food to the refugees. Although it was easy to attract the attention of the Holy City, it was not a problem to bring a small amount of food if the interval between visits was shortened. Although they did not bring a lot of food each time, the frequency was high. As Lancelot was a guerrilla knight, there was no problem for him to run around every day. Lancelot would come here once every few days to deliver food to the refugees. Sometimes it would be 1 or 2 days, sometimes it would be 2 or 3 days. The refugees had been suffering from hunger before and had scrimped on food. In addition to Lancelot's frequent delivery of food, the refugees did not lack food. At the very least, they had food and shelter. These refugees were very satisfied. Unlike before, they didn't have any food to eat, and they didn't even know when they would die. Lancelot came this time to deliver food to the refugees. However, he happened to meet Wooming on the way and invited Wooming to come along. "Thank you for your hard work, Lancelot," Wooming said to Lancelot without turning his head as he looked at the knights distributing food to the refugees. "Of course not, Sir Villo. I am just atoning for my sins." Lancelot did not feel that it was hard for him. In fact, it was in line with his knight's ethics and his way of survival. "Forget it, as you wish." Wooming shook his head. After taking a look around the camp, Wu Ming said his goodbyes. "After all, I came here because I was interested in hunting. I have other things to do," Wu Ming said. "Sir Villo, are you going to the mountains in the north?" Lancelot asked. "That's right. I'm going to mountain people's territory to look for Chaldea's master." Wu Ming had no doubt that Lancelot had guessed his next move. The Knights of the Round Table were not only outstanding in terms of bravery, but also in terms of intelligence. They would not be able to lead troops into battle. Of course, some of the more special Knights of the Round Table were exceptions. "Lancelot, you'd better continue to be a guerrilla knight. I'll look for you when the time comes." When Wu Ming said, "when the time comes," he actually did not know when that time would come. After all, things were always changing. Lancelot could be used like the Sky Wings as a trump card. "Well then, Sir Villo, I won't see you off. Besides, staying in the same place for a long time isn't the style of a guerrilla knight like me. I'm going to leave as well." Wu Ming nodded. He wasn't so pretentious that he needed someone to send him off. "Then, I'll take my leave first." "Sir Villo." Just as Wu Ming was about to leave, he suddenly heard Lancelot call out to him. "HM?" Wu Ming turned to look at Lancelot. As if he did not dare to look Wu Ming in the eye, Lancelot silently lowered his head. "The person the Queen likes is you. There's nothing between the Queen and me. If you feel that I've tarnished the Queen's reputation, you can take my life at any time. I won't complain." Lancelot's tone was heavy and self-reproachful. Although Lancelot was trying to save Guinevere, who had almost been burned at the stake, his actions had indeed tarnished Guinevere's reputation. "Don't worry, Lancelot. I don't take this matter to heart." Not only did he trust Lancelot, but he also trusted Guinevere. To be honest, Lancelot had fought side by side with him for many years. He knew Lancelot very well. Lancelot could indeed do such a thing. But the most important thing was that Wu Ming believed in Guinevere. Guinevere had been secretly in love with him for many years. Because of Artoria, Guinevere had been enduring until Wu Ming left. It wasn't unreasonable for Guinevere to fall for Morgan Le Fay's scheme so easily. Guinevere was madly in love with Wu Ming. That kind of madness made Guinevere, a heroic spirit, sublimated. Although Guinevere looked weak when he met Wu Ming before, Guinevere appeared as a berserker. Although he couldn't cheat like Ruler, Wu Ming could still distinguish the ranks. This reminded Wu Ming of the berserker Kyoheim he met in the American Singularity. Fortunately, Guinevere's madness was different from Kyoheim's. The different madness allowed Guinevere to gain different abilities from Kyoheim. Guinevere couldn't lie to Wu Ming. Although Wu Ming didn't know this, Wu Ming could see from Guinevere's eyes that Guinevere didn't lie. That was enough. After all, trust was quite important. Of course, this didn't mean that Wu Ming didn't believe in Lancelot, but Guinevere was more trustworthy. Moreover, Lancelot, who didn't have much contact with Guinevere, didn't have a good impression of Guinevere. In a joking way, Defeated Dog Lancelot was a good title. Asterisk Sigma for all, Lancelot didn't serve as Guinevere's guard knight, and they didn't have a long bond. Plus he missed Wu Ming. Guinevere's impression of Lancelot in his mind was just a knight loyal to the king and a knight who worshipped Wu Ming. Guinevere has explained it to me. Don't overthink. Just focus on your own things. You should know that Galahad is a singularity. Let's not talk about others, but at the very least, don't disappoint Galahad. Yes. Villo, Sama, I will remember your words. Lancelot, who was touched by Wu Ming's trust and relationship, was moved by Wu Ming's knight salute. Then, I'll leave first. After Wu Ming finished, he waved his hand, and a black-purple ripple appeared, engulfing Wu Ming's body, and then disappeared. Looking at the place where Wu Ming disappeared, Lancelot looked serious and said slowly, Villo, Sama, I will live up to your expectations. Chapter 736. Wu Ming left. After checking the surroundings, Lancelot also left with his troops. This camp was still very safe, so there was no need for too much protection. If they did that, it might even attract attention. This was why Wu Ming didn't take any protective measures against the camp. On the other side, inside Abenheim's body, in the monitoring room that Abent specially built for Wu Ming, Gilliel was lying on her back in boredom, floating in the air like a rootless duckweed. Master is so slow, why isn't he back yet? Gilliel said in boredom. Abent had now arrived at the northern mountainous area and had stayed here for quite some time. This gave people the feeling that Wu Ming has been gone for a long time. However, this wasn't the case. After Wu Ming left Abent's body, he landed on the ground and waited for Lancelot to start counting, chatting with Lancelot, following Lancelot to the refugee camp, and finally visiting and staying in the camp. Although this series of events took some time, it definitely wasn't long. At most, it would take 1 or 2 hours. The long time that Gopral mentioned was just her own complaint. However, it was normal for Gilliel to be so bored. Even if it was only half an hour, it was a boring time that was difficult for Gilliel to pass. However, this was the real Gilliel, wasn't it? At this moment, a dark purple portal suddenly appeared beside the sofa, and a person wearing east wind clothing walked out of the ripples. This person was Wu Ming. Master, you're finally back. Gilliel was like a bird returning to its nest. The wings on her back flapped as she flew toward Wu Ming. I'm back, Gilliel. Wu Ming first smiled as he answered Gilliel, then spoke again. After I left, you didn't mess around, did you, Gilliel? Wu Ming still looked at Gilliel with a smile, but this smile was so cold in Gilliel's eyes. Iciness caused Jillian, who was flying in the air, to stop instantly. Then, Jillian obediently descended from the air. How could that be? I'm sure I didn't mess around, Master. You have to believe me. Seeing Wu Ming's clenched fists, Gopral hurriedly explained with a yawn. Wu Ming smiled as he walked up to Gopral and raised his hand. Jillian closed her eyes subconsciously. Then, she felt a palm stroking her head. Gopral opened her eyes and coincidentally saw Wu Ming retract his hand from Gopral's head. That's right, Wu Ming was actually stroking Jillian's head. Seeing that I'm in a good mood, I'll let you off today. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he turned around and sat on the sofa. Gilliel, who had been left in a daze, came to her senses and touched her head uncomfortably. She was not used to Wu Ming being so gentle to her. After all, every time Wu Ming, he would knock on her head. This sudden touch left Gilliel a loss. Ever since she became Wu Ming's dependent, Gilliel had never considered whether Wu Ming trusted her as a subordinate or the question of her loyalty to Wu Ming. Firstly, she believed in the former master of the Skywings, Arthas, and also believed that Arthas was the new master they had found. Secondly, no matter who the master was as a weapon, she just had to do her job well. Therefore, Gilliel's attitude toward Wu Ming was very casual. Although Wu Ming often knocked on Gilliel's head, that did not mean that Wu Ming hated her. It was just a casual, small punishment. Gilliel naturally understood this, so she did not mind. However, habit was a scary thing. Having gotten used to being knocked on the head, she was not used to the sudden touch. In any case, I don't have to suffer. Gilliel smiled. After all, Wu Ming was likely to be their master for life if nothing went wrong, so she just had to follow in his footsteps. Gilliel gently flapped her wings and flew behind Wu Ming, looking like she had not learned her lesson. Wu Ming naturally noticed Gilliel's abnormality, but Wu Ming did not do anything. If he did something right, he would be rewarded, and if he did something wrong, he would be punished. If he was in a good mood, Wu Ming did not mind giving out extra rewards, such as a pat on the head. If he was in a bad mood, Wuming did not mind giving out extra punishments, such as a spanking. Perhaps it was this calmness that made Giliel become more and more impudent. Not thinking about this anymore, Wuming looked at the virtual screen that Abin had brought up again. It showed the scene of the mountainous area below. Abin isn't slow. Wuming sighed. Wuming had visually estimated the distance and estimated the time Abin would take, but Abin still gave Wuming a pleasant surprise. Although his body was rather large, Abin was not like those massive creatures. He still had the advantage of speed. When Wuming returned, Giliel's bored look indicated that Abin had been here for a while. Although he did not know the exact time, this also meant that Abin was not slow. After all, Abin is a fantasy breed master. That's a race that's close to God. Abin, who was able to follow Arthu, was one of the best among fantasy breeds, so his speed was naturally not slow. As expected of Abin, Wuming praised Abin. Then, Abin, can you find a village in these mountainous areas? Wuming said, while looking at the magic screen. Abin was indeed above the mountainous area, but it was not small. Logically speaking, when looking down from the sky, it should be very easy to find the place he wanted to find, not to mention finding a village in the mountainous area. Logically speaking, it should be very conspicuous. However, because Abin was too high up, he could not see the exact situation on the ground. If he shrank it, he would only be able to see the specific situation of a small area. Thus, Wuming asked Abin if he could find a village in the mountainous area. Wuming thought that if it really did not work, he would contact Azrael and give it a try. With the contract of the dependent incarnation, Wuming could naturally contact Azrael, but because he needed to reduce the consumption of magic power, Wuming closed his connection with the other Skywing breeds, only keeping the identity of master and servant. But before Abin could answer, Giliel answered first. There's no need to go through so much trouble, master. Below where we are now is actually a village. Chapter 737. As if to confirm Gopril's words, Abant activated the magic power virtual screen and continuously shrunk the map below him. Immediately after, a village built on a mountain, as if the mountain had been modified, appeared in front of Wuming. Abant's operation was very similar to a real map, which made Wuming's eyes light up. You're really becoming more and more modern. Well done, Abant. Actually, we were just lucky. When Abant stopped and explored below, we discovered that there was a village below Abant. It's most likely the mountain people that Master is looking for. Gopril answered Wuming in a rather serious tone, not minding that she used the word we. If one ignored this sentence and thought about it, it was normal for Abant to be able to discover the village below him. As a weapon, with a good sense of war, Abant would definitely check if there were any threats around him in an unfamiliar environment, especially below him. Abant was a complete fantasy breed, but fantasy breeds were also animals, and animals still value their abdomens. However, it was also because of this that Abant discovered the village of the mountain people, which saved Wuming the effort of finding them. In that case, Gopril, come down with me and take a look, Wuming said as he stood up. Really, master? Instead, it was Giliel who became excited. After all, Wuming had refused to bring Gopril out with various reasons, so Gopril had no choice but to stay. This time, she could finally go out to play and help. How could Gopril not be excited? I feel bad about leaving you here all the time, but I'll say this in advance. Don't cause me trouble. Wuming was giving her a sweet date, but the effect was quite obvious to Gopril. Yes, master. I know. Therefore, Wuming brought Gopril, who was full of flattery and smiles, into the portal. Below Abant, in the village built on the mountain, the simple and unadorned villagers worked at sunrise and rested at sunset. Even if there wasn't enough food and the water wasn't clean, they weren't dispirited because of this, and they didn't frown because of the war. Although the war did not affect them to a certain extent, it could be seen from this that the people of the mountains were optimistic. However, optimism did not mean that the mountain people were brave. At this moment, they were frightened by the sudden appearance of the black-purple ripples at the village entrance. Because the village wasn't very big and it was daytime, the villagers were all busy. Therefore, the abnormality at the entrance of the village instantly attracted everyone's attention. Quickly go and find Lord 100 Faces. It was not known who shouted, but someone immediately reacted. A few thin and light youths who looked like they could run quickly volunteered themselves and ran towards the houses in the village behind them. However, they did not think that with so many villagers noticing the abnormality at the entrance of the village, how could Hassan, an inhuman existence, not notice it? Before those young people could run far, a black figure appeared in front of them. It was a petite and muscular figure. Her body was only wrapped in a few pieces of simple cloth. Although she was not big, the slightly bulging female sexual characteristics proved that she was a woman. The most special thing was that she wore a skull mask on her face. There was no doubt that she was one of Hassan, or rather, she was the Lord 100 Faces in the villagers' mouths. Lord 100 Faces, you're here. As if they had found their pillar of support, the villagers gathered around Hassan, who was a man of many faces. Hurry up and get away from here. If there is a battle, then go to the underground caves and the surrounding mountain walls to take refuge first, Hassan said to the surrounding villagers with a solemn expression. Yes, Lord 100 Faces. The villagers immediately responded. They all knew their limits. If they insisted on staying, there was no doubt that they would add a burden to Hassan. Moreover, if the enemy was weak and did not need their help, Hassan alone could handle it. If the enemy was strong, they would naturally be useless as a burden. Immediately afterward, the villagers began to retreat to the village behind them. If they took a few steps back in advance, they could quickly leave if something happened. At this moment, the black-purple ripples suddenly changed. Like a stone entering the water, the black-purple ripples were stirred. Then a black-haired, red-eyed boy in local costume and a lovely girl with wings came out. It was naturally Wuming and Gopral. The handsome man and the beautiful woman made the villagers a little overwhelmed for a while and relaxed their vigilance. Who are you? Hassan asked Wuming vigilantly. She saw that the two people in front of her were servants. On Wuming's side, because someone took the lead to ask him a question as soon as he came out, Wuming was stunned. He was a little surprised by the scene in front of him, but he could accept it because it was reasonable. Because of the vision provided by Abanthy, Wuming's portal could be opened in this village. But Wuming did not expect that the portal he opened would directly open at the entrance of the village, and it was seen by a group of villagers. The strange black-purple ripples naturally brought panic to the villagers, and it also brought suspicion to Hassan. The solution to this situation was to express goodwill. The best way to clear up misunderstandings was to be honest, such as answering the other party's questions truthfully. I'm a servant of the Saber rank. Real name is Vilo Serenseed. This is the servant of the Berserker rank that I summoned. Real name is Gopral. What? Hassan was stunned. For Hassan, who had hundreds of personalities and mastered hundreds of skills, it was easy to judge whether a person was lying through their expression and language. She could see that the other party was not lying, but this was also what shocked Hassan. It wasn't strange for the other party to mention their class. After all, servants always refer to each other by their class. But what was strange was that when the other party mentioned their class, he also mentioned their real name. And it seemed that he was not lying. How could this not shock Hassan? As a servant, Hassan naturally knew the importance of the real name. The real name represented a weakness. If there was no big weakness, it would be fine. If there was a servant like Achilles and Siegfried who had quite obvious weaknesses, it was likely that they would be trapped. However, the other party did not seem to be famous. Gopral had never heard of it at all. As for Vilo Serenseed, Hassan was shocked and entered the battle state. You are the Lion King's people. Chapter 738. The reason why Hassan thought that Wuming was the Lion King was because of the name Vilo Serenth. Because the enemy was the Lion King, and the name of the Lion King's knights was the same as the name of the Knights of the Round Table. As a Hassan who mastered hundreds of skills, the knowledge of historical stories also existed. As a result, Hassan naturally had information about various heroes. Coincidentally, the information about the Knights of the Round Table was also in her mind. After investigation, she naturally investigated the Lion King who occupied the Holy City and his knights. She found that the Lion King's knights might be the Knights of the Round Table. Why was she so sure? It was because they were servants. The Lion King and his knights who suddenly appeared defeated the Lionheart King after a fierce battle and occupied the Holy City. This was not the era of Huga Hassan. Huga Hassan also understood that she herself was a follower. Therefore, Huga Hassan guessed that the Lion King of the Holy City and his knights were also followers. After knowing that the Lion King's knights had the same name as the Knights of the Round Table, she doubted whether the Lion King was King Arthur. However, because the Lion King lived in seclusion and the Holy City was extremely difficult to sneak in, Hassan had never seen the Lion King. However, Hassan had seen a few people like Gawain, Lancelot, Agul, Mordred, Tristan, and the like. Not only her, but her compatriots, Cursed Riz Hassan and Drunk Smoke Hassan, had also seen those people. According to the books, those people were most likely the Knights of the Round Table. Vilo Sarinth was also the name of the Knights of the Round Table. Together with the Knights of the Round Table in the Holy City, it was impossible for Hassan not to misunderstand. I'm Vilo Sarinth, a Knight of the Round Table, but I'm not from the Holy City, Wu Ming explained helplessly. Wu Ming changed into the clothes of the Eastern Wind because he was afraid that the mountain people would think that he was a Knight of the Round Table. This was realized. Wu Ming didn't have a problem with revealing his weakness if he revealed his name. The reason why Wu Ming told Wu Ming his real name was because he had no weaknesses, so he was not afraid of being targeted. Gopral was even more so because she was a guest from another world. In addition, Wu Ming didn't think that anyone would recognize him, so he reported his name without hesitation. But he didn't expect the servant in front of him to recognize the character that his name represented. I can only say that is expected of Hassan. Wu Ming sighed inwardly. As an assassin, her ability to gather information was naturally not weak. Wu Ming did not know much about the Middle East. In Wu Ming's opinion, there should not be any books about the Knights of the Round Table here, which was shrouded in war and apocalypse. However, Wu Ming did not think that Hassan might have known about the Knights of the Round Table for a long time. You want to lie to me? Don't even think about it. Hassan didn't listen to Wu Ming. If her analysis was correct, the Lion King was King Arthur, and she had never seen a Knight of the Round Table who was independent of the Holy City's forces. Damn Knight, not only did you harm my compatriots, but you also want to kill all of us. I will never let you go. Hassan rushed to Wu Ming as if he was blinded by anger. In an instant, silhouettes of different sizes and genders appeared beside Hassan. Clones of the spiritual base? You are Hassan of the Round Table. Wu Ming saw the identity of Hassan of the Round Table at a glance. The assassin class card made by Julian contained the power of almost all Hassans except the first Hassan. As someone who had studied the assassin class card, Wu Ming naturally understood the ability of each Hassan to be able to create a large number of clones that were not illusions, except for Hassan of the Round Table, who was now known as the existence of multiple personalities. There should be no Hassan who could do it. And you say you are not from the Holy City? Hassan of the Round Table responded angrily. Those who were familiar with her were either her friends or her enemies. She naturally couldn't be friends with any Knights of the Round Table, so there was only one answer. Enemy. Die. Countless figures surrounded Wu Ming and Gopral, and then swarmed up as if they were going to fight to the death. Wu Ming saw that the other party did not listen to his explanation and shook his head helplessly. Could it be that because the other party had multiple personalities, he had some mental problems? Wu Ming remembered that Gadotsi also said that they had met Hassan of the Round Table when they were in the desert. When the other party saw the pattern on Matthew's shield, he thought that Matthew was from the Holy City and directly abandoned the kidnapped Nidakells and ran away. Wu Ming decided not to explain to the mental patient and beat him first. Gopral, Wu Ming said casually. Yes, Gopral responded with a smile, and then the magic power in her body was released. The magic power that was comparable to a low-level noble relic was released and instantly broke the clones of the Round Table that surrounded Wu Ming and Gopral. Although Gopril's magic power release broke many of the clones, there were still many clones around the village entrance. Damn it! At least we have to buy time for the villagers. Hassan of the Round Table, as the main body, was hidden among the clones, looking at the villagers who had begun to retreat and gritted his teeth. Then, one of the clones left and ran toward the villagers. The clones would give the villagers the direction of escape. The enemy was a holy city knight, and it was no longer safe to hide in the underground shelter of the mountain. After she was defeated or killed, the other party would definitely be able to find that shelter. So, the Round Table let her clones guide the villagers to the cursed Wrist in the east, while her main body stayed behind to resist the enemy. After Hassan of the Round Table guessed that the other party was a holy city knight, he was not prepared to leave alive. A clone was a clone after all. Disregarding everything else, the clone's strength was much weaker than the main body. Otherwise, the clones that besieged Wooming and Gopril in the beginning would not have been directly destroyed by Gopril's magic power release. In short, the main body could not leave. This was indeed strange for her as an assassin. After all, an assassin was not suitable for direct combat. If she could run, the Round Table would not hesitate. Just like when she met the Holy City Knight, when she kidnapped the Sun King in the desert, she would have chosen to run because she had no compatriots to protect behind her. But she could not do that now. The village was behind her, and the villagers were ordinary people. If she did not hold back the enemy, the villagers would not be able to escape. I hope they can escape to the cursed Wrist in the east. Bai Qian prayed in her heart. The village she was in was located in the west of the mountains, and the cursed Wrist was located in the east of the mountains. Although the villages on both sides were not far away, they were not close either. Everything would be fine if they escaped, because she had seen the cursed Wrist Hassan before. The other party was the current generation's Hassan, a qualified Hassan, and would not leave the villagers in the West Village alone. But all this depended on the Round Table Hassan being able to hold back Wooming and Gopril. Chapter 739. Giliel, 7 o'clock. Wooming did not even look at the 7 o'clock direction and said casually to Giliel, "Understood." Giliel smiled cruelly, grabbed the energy scythe that appeared out of thin air, and rushed toward Wooming's 7 o'clock direction. How is this possible? Hassan's heart skipped a beat. She was at Wooming's 7 o'clock direction. But how did the opponent know? This was the first thought that popped up in Hassan's mind. However, this was a normal thing in Wooming's view. As early as when Hassan appeared in front of Wooming with his true body, she had nowhere to hide in Wooming's eyes. If Hassan did not appear in his true body at the beginning, Wooming would have to put in a lot of effort to find his true body. But now it was easy. The reason why Assassin was called Assassin was because Assassin had excellent concealment ability. However, Hassan, who had appeared in front of Wooming, had undoubtedly lost the advantage of excellent concealment. Wooming could easily find Hassan's true body. Finding 100 Faces Hassan's true body meant that 100 Faces Hassan was defeated, because he could not resist Giliel's assault at all. Damn it, Hassan secretly cursed and commanded his doppelgangers to cover him. However, this was of no use. A berserker who did not lack magic power was not something an assassin who had lost the advantage of concealment could stop. Numbers might have a little effect in front of Giliel, but because Giliel had overused his clones, each clone had become quite weak. As mentioned earlier, Hassan's clones were weaker than his true body because the power of the clones came from his true body. When the true body split into clones, it meant that the true body was weakened. And the power that was weakened from the true body was divided into many parts, so naturally, it was not that strong. Therefore, in just an instant, the human wall formed by Hassan was violently broken through by Giliel. Wielding her magic scythe, Jillian slashed at her path in a disorderly manner. Due to Wooming's embodiment of authority, Gopril could use her mana without restraint. Every slash and slash contained a large amount of mana. Because Hassan's essence was multiple personalities, her clones were equivalent to people with different consciousnesses. Damn it. Die. Stop. Don't come any closer. Don't come over. The mana release transformed into a shockwave that the 100 Faces doppelgangers couldn't resist at all. There were too many of them, and their power wasn't weak at all. Like different people, they all made noises. Among them, there were definitely those who were timid and scared out of their wits. There were also those who weren't afraid of death and wanted to risk their lives to attack Jillian. There were all kinds of personalities. After all, wasn't there multiple personalities? But that was not important. What was important was that Hassan was about to be captured alive. Under such circumstances, there was only one way for Baijiu Hassan to win, and that was to capture the leader first. Die! Hassan's voice came from behind Wuming, and Wuming could even feel a cold wind slashing at his neck. Baijiu Hassan was indeed an assassin. Relying on the cover of his clones, Baijiu Hassan successfully sneaked to Wuming's side and carried out the assassination. Giliel turned her head and looked at Baijiu Hassan, who appeared from the shadow behind Wuming, and exclaimed, "Master!" After all, Giliel was not a heroic spirit. Giliel's current servant body was just a clone in Giliel's eyes. Giliel did not discover in time that Baijiu Hassan had slipped away and sneaked to Wuming's side. However, this did not mean that Wuming did not discover it. Wuming had been a servant many times, and he had also been an assassin because Wuming knew about the assassin class. With Wuming's understanding of the assassin class, although Baijiu Hassan's behavior was not showing off his slight skill in front of an expert, it was ineffective against Wuming. Clatter. The sound of chains rang behind Wuming, and Baijiu Hassan groaned. Ugh! Wuming unhurriedly turned his head and looked behind him. The purple-haired woman with the skull mask was pouncing forward, and there was a dagger in her forearm. The dagger was only a few centimeters away from Wuming's neck. However, Wuming did not panic at all, because at this moment, Baijiu Hassan's body was wrapped in silver-white chains that exuded a purple aura. That was the Annihilation Lock that merged with Wuming's authority incarnation. Baijiu Hassan's limbs and body were tightly entangled by the Annihilation Lock that appeared from the void. Because Wuming was wary of Assassin's body, Baijiu Hassan's palms and fingers were entangled. Otherwise, with Baijiu Hassan's skills, he could send the dagger into Wuming's throat at such a distance by moving his fingers. Wuming looked at Baijiu Hassan's skull mask and fell into silence. Not to mention, it was quite scary to look at such a close distance. However, it was also because of such a close distance that Wuming also discovered that Baijiu Hassan's mask seemed to be able to be taken off. Although he knew that Hassan's mask was inlaid on his face after shaving off his face, he always had to look at the real thing, right? King Arthur was a woman, so maybe Hassan did not have to dig out his face and then inlay a skull mask on it like in the records. You're a girl, so why are you wearing a skull mask? Wuming said as he put his hand on Baijiu Hassan's face. You. He easily took off Baijiu Hassan's mask, revealing Baijiu Hassan's indignant face. It was not a delicate face. Although it was a little tanned, she was still a girl. However, looking at Baijiu Hassan's limbs and the slightly bulging muscles on his body, Wuming chose to remain silent. You bastard! Baijiu Hassan naturally saw the meaning in Wuming's eyes and roared angrily. She was a woman, after all. Her skin was just a little tanned and a little more muscular. Did she have to look at people differently? Master, are you okay? At this moment, Gopral suddenly came to Wuming's side. Because Baijiu Hassan was captured, Annihilation Lock took effect, and all of Baijiu Hassan's clones had disappeared. The person who can kill your master hasn't been born yet. Wuming smiled and answered Gopral jokingly. However, Wuming was right. Even Wuming's biggest enemy now, Gidia, who had fused with part of the Black Mud, could not kill Wuming, at least for now. Wuming turned to look at Baijiu Hassan, ignoring Baijiu Hassan's angry expression and words. Wuming looked like he was going to negotiate. So, can we have a good talk, Baijiu Hassan? However, no negotiation would tie the other party up. Chapter 740. Negotiate? There is nothing to talk about between us. If I lose to you, I can only blame myself for not being as good as you. Just kill me. 100 Faces Hassan turned his head away, looking like he was ready to die heroically. According to Hundred Faces Hassan's understanding, after the people of the Holy City caught the enemy, if there was no torture value, then they would definitely kill them directly. Simply put, no captives were left. However, there were exceptions. The sentence, if there was no torture value, just now was the best explanation. If there was torture value, the Knights of the Holy City would capture the captured person. His current state reminded Hundred Faces of one of Hassan's compatriots. The people of the Holy City needed Hassan's information, so they took him away after they caught him. The purpose was to torture him for information. How similar Hundred Faces Hassan was to her compatriot now. Hundred Faces Hassan looked at the chain that wrapped around him. This strange chain constantly nibbled away at the magic power on the surface of his body. Only by keeping the magic power in the body and not using it could he slow down the chains nibbling away at the magic power. However, this only slowed down the speed. What should be nibbled away was still being nibbled away. Although Hundred Faces Hassan could commit suicide without using magic power, this chain seemed to be able to nibble away at Hundred Faces Hassan's strength. What he said to Wu Ming just now had exhausted Hundred Faces Hassan's strength. This made Hundred Faces Hassan not even have the strength to commit suicide. Damn it, am I gonna leave here? Hundred Faces Hassan shouted in his heart, but his eyelids gradually closed. The power of the Annihilation Lock was not something that Hundred Faces Hassan could resist. The Annihilation Lock, controlled by Wu Ming, was gradually nibbling away at all his power, causing Hundred Faces Hassan to enter a coma. Generally speaking, entering a coma when extremely weak meant that one was half a step into death. Walala. Suddenly, Hundred Faces Hassan felt the chain that tightly bound him leave him, and Hundred Faces, who had lost most of his power, also collapsed to the ground because of the lack of the support of the chain. What do you mean? Hundred Faces Hassan struggled to support himself and frowned at Wu Ming. Due to the removal of the Annihilation Lock, Hundred Faces Hassan's power was no longer being devoured. Although he could not recover quickly, at least he would not fall into a coma. This is my sincerity, Wu Ming said in a seemingly sincere and serious manner. Actually, the reason why Wu Ming had released the Hundred Faces Hassan was because he was not familiar with the Annihilation Lock. Wu Ming underestimated the power of the Annihilation Lock. He did not expect that the Annihilation Lock could almost annihilate a servant's power. Therefore, Wu Ming quickly let go of Hundred Faces Hassan. This practice proved Wu Ming's sincerity. Releasing Hundred Face Hassan was to prevent her from dying. It also showed that Wu Ming was not afraid that Hundred Face Hassan would run away, because he was very sincere. However, in Hassan's eyes, this was a naked insult. Firstly, he had released him when he was about to lose consciousness. It was obvious that he didn't want the interrogator to fall unconscious and continue the interrogation. Secondly, the other party was saying that it didn't matter if he let her go, and even if she ran away, he would catch her again. These two were Hundred Face Hassan's inner understanding, so she was even angrier. Don't you think you can get any information from me? Give up. At that moment, Hundred Face Hassan was ready to commit suicide. But Wu Ming did not make a move, because Gilil, who was next to Wu Ming, made a move. Swish! A girl's white arm flashed quickly, and her arm cut through the atmosphere with a loud sound. Boom! Only a boom sound was heard. Hundred Face Hassan's head was pressed to the ground by the soft arm, and smoke and dust were everywhere. The arm that attacked Hundred Face Hassan was Gilil's. Don't be too greedy, you monkey. Gilil's eyes were red, and her pupils turned into a big sword symbol. Gilil's wings spread out, and the magic that had been transformed was emitted from Gilil's wings, floating into the sky like smoke. Feathers fell from the sky slightly. They were the feathers that were blown into the sky because Gilil attacked Hundred Face Hassan too quickly. Gilil's left hand grabbed Hundred Face Hassan's face and pressed it deeply into the ground, and traces of blood flowed into the ground. Gilil's other hand was holding a pinkish-purple magic scythe, eager to try. This gave people the feeling that she would cut off Hundred Face Hassan's head in the next moment. That was how Hundred Face Hassan felt at that moment anyway. Not only that, Hundred-Face Hassan could see through the gaps between Giliel's fingers that Giliel's hand, holding the scythe, was trembling slightly. "She's suppressing the urge to kill me?" Hassan was shocked. He, who had hundreds of memories, could naturally see Jillian's current state. But she was not afraid of death. She was just afraid of Giliel's current state. She felt that the angel in front of her was a beast, and it was the kind that was angered. Death was not scary. What was scary was living a life worse than death. Although the other party did not do anything to him, the current Giliel gave Hundred-Face Hassan such a feeling. "Calm down, Giliel." Wuming came behind Giliel and stroked Giliel's head. After all, Wuming was not a good person. Although he had a servant form and his faction was order, Wuming himself was not completely order. Compared to order, neutrality was more suitable for Wuming. Doing good deeds to good people and evil deeds to evil people. Having compassion but not excessive compassion for others. Having evil deeds but not indulging in evil deeds. Wuming was already very polite to Hundred-Face Hassan. He tried not to provoke a fight and defended himself. After the battle, he only wanted to capture Hundred-Face alive. He did not attack the villagers and showed mercy everywhere. However, Hundred-Face still did not appreciate it. Although Giliel followed Wuming for a short time, she was a person with a high EQ. She figured out Wuming's character through details in a short time. So, she was angry with Hundred-Face Hassan. Hundred-Face Hassan was too hostile to Wuming, or too hostile to the Knights of the Holy City, although the Knights of the Holy City had done a lot of evil things. To put it nicely, it was abhorrence of evil. To put it bluntly, it was self-righteous. Giliel believed that Hundred-Face Hassan was no longer worthy of Wuming's kindness. Hundred-Face Hassan was already an insult to Wuming. As Wuming's loyal subordinate, Giliel could not stand it, so she made a move. After being touched by Wuming for a while, Giliel, who calmed down a little, let go of Hundred-Face Hassan, and blood fell from Giliel's fingers. It was Hundred-Face Hassan's blood, not Giliel's. "You're just a strand of magic power. At most, you're just the soul of a special monkey. Monkeys can't see the kindness of my master." Although Giliel had calmed down a little, her eyes were still red. It could be said that if Giliel didn't see that Wuming didn't want to cause trouble, she would have used Sky Strike to blast Hundred-Face Hassan to pieces. Hundred-Face Hassan fell into silence. By now, she also saw that there was something else going on. Chapter 741. Hundred-Face Hassan was lying in the ground groove that matched his body size. This was caused by Gopril's huge force. On the surface, Hundred-Face Hassan was a little stunned at the moment, as if he was beaten silly by Gopril. Blood flowed out from the back of Hundred-Face Hassan's head, soaking the soil and making it bright red. When Gopril attacked Hundred-Face Hassan, Hundred-Face Hassan was in a weak state, and Gopril's attack caused serious injuries to Hundred-Face Hassan, but it was not fatal. Hundred-Face Hassan was also a servant. As long as the brain in charge of thinking and the core located in the heart were not destroyed, Hundred-Face Hassan would not die, or he could still be saved, so Hundred-Face Hassan struggled and sat up slowly. Although the injury she suffered was not fatal, it was still quite uncomfortable. At the beginning, Hundred-Face Hassan felt that her ribs were basically all broken. "Are you really not from the Holy City?" Hundred-Face Hassan said in a weak voice. After experiencing the intimidation of the beast Gopril, Hundred-Face Hassan, who was blinded by anger because of hatred for the Holy City Knight, also calmed down, or she got rid of the anger she deliberately fell into before. In fact, when Wuming defended himself, Hundred-Face Hassan also had a trace of doubt before. But compared to believing that Wuming, who was wearing the skin of the Holy City Knight, was a good person, Hundred-Face Hassan was more inclined to believe that Wuming was a bad person. The reason was simple. That was Hundred-Face Hassan's responsibility to the villagers. If what Wuming said was true, then nothing would happen to the villagers. But if Wuming lied to her, then the villagers were likely to be wiped out. Hundred-Face Hassan had the ability to detect micro-expressions, so he also had the ability to see if a person was lying. But was there such a possibility? Assuming that Wuming was not hostile, But the people behind him, or the higher-ups of the holy city, Lion King, were hostile to the villagers. Exposing the village to Wu-Ming would result in the villagers being wiped out. And who knew if Wu-Ming had the means to deceive her skills? If Wu-Ming said that he was good at micro-expressions, he could also deceive her. If the villagers' lives were lost because of Hundred Faces Hassan's carelessness, Hundred Faces Hassan would not forgive herself. And if Wu-Ming was not a bad person, then at least the other party would not kill him. Therefore, with a similar principle of better to kill the wrong than to let the wrong person go, Hundred Faces Hassan chose to enter a state of anger to test Wu-Ming's authenticity. Because putting Wu-Ming on the enemy's side was the safest thing to do at present. He could only say that she was indeed a mental patient with multiple personality disorder. Not only did she think too much, but she also thought too much. If Wu-Ming knew 100 Looks Hassan's inner thoughts, he would definitely ridicule him. Why did she say that all-faced Hassan was outrageous? It was because she had made a wrong bet, and a very wrong one at that. Wu-Ming had the ability to capture her alive in an instant. As a result, 100 Faces Hassan could not complete the judgment of whether Wu-Ming was good or evil. Judging whether a person was good or evil could only be done in an extreme state. As for Wu-Ming, who captured her alive, 100 Faces Hassan could not judge at all. However, these were not in the way. The most important thing was still Gopral. Gopral was quite angry at 100 Faces Hassan's rudeness. Gopral's sudden attack not only shocked 100 Faces Hassan, but also almost made her leave the stage. As mentioned before, if it were not for Gopral holding back because of Wu-Ming, 100 Faces Hassan would have been killed by Gopral, sent back to the Martyr's Palace, and left the stage. Of course it's true. Gawain and the others chose to be loyal to our king who has embarked on a wrong path, but I didn't. I maintained the virtues of a knight. In short, I'm a genuinely good person. Wu-Ming answered 100 Faces Hassan with a righteous face. Gopral looked at Wu-Ming with a dumbfounded expression. Wu-Ming's words made Gopral, who had calmed down a little after Wu-Ming touched her heart, feel her heartbeat accelerate again. To put it simply, she was shocked. It was still the same sentence. Although it had only been a short time, Gopral thought she was quite familiar with her current master. Although her master was not considered a bad person, he could not be classified as a genuinely good person. However, as Wu-Ming's subordinate, Gopral naturally would not tear down her master's stage in front of outsiders, so Gopral honestly chose to shut up and averted her gaze from Wu-Ming. When Gopral shifted her gaze, Wu-Ming looked at Gopral vaguely, his eyes full of satisfaction. Although Wu-Ming did not guess 100 Faces Hassan's thoughts, as Gopral said, Wu-Ming was not a good person, nor was he a kind man. Wu-Ming treated people with sincerity, but 100 Faces Hassan treated Wu-Ming like this. How could Wu-Ming not teach 100 Faces Hassan a lesson? It could be said that Gopral's sudden attack on 100 Faces Hassan was the result of Wu-Ming's indulgence. After all, how could Wu-Ming, who had the willpower, not detect Gopral's location? Wu-Ming had been using the willpower since he came to this village, and it was also because of the willpower that he locked on 100 Faces Hassan's body. I'm here to find Chaldea's master and prepare to give her the Holy Grail. I need Chaldea's help to repair this singularity, Wu-Ming said, taking out a large golden cup from the golden ripples that suddenly appeared beside him. There was no doubt that it was the Holy Grail. Sure enough, the moment the Holy Grail was taken out, 100 Faces Hassan was shocked. As a servant, 100 Faces Hassan naturally knew about the existence of the Holy Grail. This made the doubts in 100 Faces Hassan, who is still doubting Wu-Ming, dissipate a lot. And I once saved Hassan and a lot of refugees from Drist. They can prove it for me, but it shouldn't be easy. Wu-Ming really didn't expect to find Hassan and the refugees. After all, they must be in this mountain. Even if Hassan has a means of communication, it can't be contacted in a short time. Do you know the name of that Hassan? 100 Faces Hassan suddenly asked. I remember listening to the refugee's name for that Hassan. It should be Smoke-Drunk Hassan, Wu-Ming said thoughtfully. Hearing Wu-Ming's words, 100 Faces Hassan's eyes lit up. Wu-Ming naturally caught on to this point and thought to himself, could it be that there's a chance? I know where the refugees saved by smoke-drunk Hassan are. It can't be the refugees who just escaped, right? Wu Ming said jokingly. However, Hundred Faces Hassan nodded. Wu Ming smiled helplessly. He was right. Chapter 742. You're quite assured. Wu Ming said to Hundred Faces Hassan in a puzzled tone. Don't look at Wu Ming's unintelligent appearance. Wu Ming knew that he was not completely classified as a good person in Hundred Faces Hassan's heart. Why was Wu Ming so sure? It was because Wu Ming had information about Hundred Faces Hassan. Hundred Faces Hassan was a multiple personality disorder patient with at least dozens of personalities. Now, if you want to do something to them, I can't stop you. Hundred Faces Hassan responded to Wu Ming weakly. He also looked at the villagers who had just left the village and had not gone far. Similarly, Wu Ming also looked at the villagers. These villagers left from another entrance of the village. They did not go far at all. There were even a small number of villagers who had just left the village on the other side. After all, the battle between Hundred Faces Hassan, Wu Ming, and Gopral ended too quickly. Those villagers were not servants. Such a short time was not enough for them. My compatriots' lives are over there. Anyway, I can't stop you. If what you said is true, then prove it to me. Hundred Faces Hassan stared at Wu Ming's eyes and said in a serious tone. However, Hundred Faces Hassan's tone made Gopral angry again. You bastard. Gopral let out a murderous aura. All Faces Hassan's fearless attitude, or rather, the attitude of throwing caution to the wind, made Gopral quite unhappy. As expected, a berserker. You're really easy to get angry. Your master hasn't gotten angry yet. Hundred Faces Hassan looked at Gopral, unwilling to admit defeat. Anyway, the worst result was to be killed and return to the martyr's palace. If Wu Ming is really a good person, a few words of ridicule will definitely not let him kill me. This was Hundred Faces Hassan's current thought. All right, Jillian, don't be angry. Maybe we'll be friends in a while, Wu Ming said as he pressed down on Jillian's shoulder. As soon as these words came out, Jillian's anger was instantly extinguished as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over her. According to his master's personality, if he were to prove his identity to the villagers, there was a possibility that he would become one of them. And if they became allies, then they couldn't casually attack their own people. Wouldn't he have to teach this guy a lesson? The way Giliel looked at Bayan Hassan became unfriendly once again. This sent a chill down Hassan's spine, and he swallowed his saliva. Then, Gopral turned to look at Wu Ming with a smile. Yes, master, you go ahead first. I'll take care of this monkey here. No. Just as Hundred Faces Hassan was about to retort, Giliel suddenly pressed her hand on Hundred Faces Hassan's mouth. Because Hundred Faces Hassan was injured and weak, even if he used both hands, he couldn't pry Giliel's hand away from his mouth. He could only whimper there. Are you sure you could take care of her? Looking at Giliel, who was still smiling at him with one hand covering Hundred Faces Hassan's mouth, Wu Ming didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Of course, after all, this monkey became like this mainly because of me. If there were people who were not familiar with Giliel, they might think that Giliel was a good person. However, Wu Ming was familiar with Giliel. He naturally knew that with Giliel's personality, she would never be so gentle to ask to take care of someone. Immediately afterward, Giliel continued. Master, don't forget that I have the authority you gave me. Although that is your authority, I seem to be able to use it too. Giliel was right. Vitality incarnation was stored in Giliel's body. It could not only be used as a passive ability, but it could also be used as an active skill. However, its power was not that sufficient. However, for the current injuries suffered by Hundred Faces Hassan, Giliel's current ability was enough. Well, okay. Then I'll leave it to you. Immediately, Wu Ming nodded. Yes, please rest assured, I will definitely heal this monkey. Giliel tilted her head and replied with a smile. However, Hundred Faces Hassan's expression became even more desperate. At that moment, Wu Ming just smiled helplessly. Remember to be moderate. Then, Wu Ming left. Hundred Faces Hassan whimpered in despair and watched Wu Ming, who ignored her, leave. Then, she saw Gypsy's beautiful smile that made her heart beat faster. She saw the angel, demon, smiling at her. Almost a few minutes later, Wu Ming returned to the village with a group of villagers. When he came back, Wu Ming had changed into the silver armor, but he was not wearing a helmet. After Wu Ming caught up with the villagers, under the panicked and fearful eyes of the villagers, he directly used magic power to materialize his full armor without saying a word. Then, without needing Wu Ming to speak, people who knew Wu Ming naturally appeared among the villagers. And these people who knew Wu Ming were naturally the refugees that Wu Ming saved. In this way, after Wu Ming explained the problem quite simply, the villagers were relieved. Simply put, it was actually a big misunderstanding, which made the villagers feel awkward. After that, the villagers who were saved warmly thanked them one by one. This caught Wu Ming a little off guard. After a very short exchange of greetings, the villagers followed Wu Ming back to the village. After being appeased, the villagers returned to their houses. After that, Wu Ming came to the place where 100 Faces Hassan and Gilio were. Huga Hassan had a look of being played to death as he slumped on the ground, while Gapril had a look of joy. But looking at 100 Faces Hassan, it seemed that the injuries he suffered before had basically healed. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you, Master. Gilio walked to Wu Ming's side. Looking at Hassan, who was slumped on the ground with an expression of being toyed with, and then looking at Gapril, who was smiling more and more happily. Even if Wu Ming did not see what happened between the two, he could more or less guess it. Anyway, it's not a good thing. However, after all, 100 Faces Hassan had been cured, so Wu Ming was not going to get to the bottom of what happened in the few minutes he was not here. Wu Ming looked at 100 Faces Hassan. You saw it too. I didn't do anything to the villagers. Some of them do know me. 100 Faces Hassan did not speak, as if he was still immersed in the broken state. But at least he was one of Hassan, the avatar of a heroic spirit in human history. 100 Faces Hassan quickly adjusted his state of mind, but his eyes were filled with shame and humiliation when he looked at Gilio. I know, it's my mistake this time. I apologize to you here. In the end, 100 Faces Hassan apologized honestly. So, can you answer us if we have any information about Master Chaldea? Chapter 743. Can you tell us, Master Chaldea, where is Tachika Fujimaru? Wu Ming asked directly. Unfortunately, I don't know. Hassan shook his head. This answer made Wu Ming frown involuntarily. It was not that Wu Ming was dissatisfied with Hassan, but he was a little irritated because he didn't get the information he needed for a long time. However, this was another matter in the eyes of Hassan. I didn't lie. I really don't know the information you said about the Master of Chaldea. There are only villagers in this village, and I don't know the Master of Chaldea. Hassan tried his best to explain. After Hassan's explanation, Wu Ming also understood what was going on. There were indeed multiple Hassans in this endless mountain range, and there were even a lot of them. But that was before Wu Ming came to this singularity. After the confrontation with Lionheart King Charlie, Western Desert Sun King, and Sacred City Lion King, the Hassans died one by one. After all, Hassan's class was Assassin, the weakest of the 7 classes. In terms of servant attributes, the other classes could be said to be able to defeat the Assassin class. Only Caster could be compared to the Assassin class. Of course, this was the ranking among ordinary servants. If it was a crown servant, then the definition of the weakest class of the Assassin class did not count. Wu Ming still remembered the first Hassan who attacked him. The guy looked like Saber wearing the skin of the Assassin class. However, other Hassans were not so powerful except for the first Hassan. All in all, according to Hassan, many Hassans died in the hands of the enemy, and there were only 4 Hassans left. Cursed Hand Hassan, who was located in the eastern village, Quiet Hand Hassan, who was previously captured by the enemy, Smoky Drunk Hassan, who was rescued by Wu Ming, and her Hassan. However, Quiet Hand Hassan was captured. Smoky Drunk Hassan was nowhere to be found. So the only one who still kept in touch with Hassan was Cursed Hand Hassan in the eastern village. Regarding the whereabouts of Drunk Smoke Hassan, Wu Ming felt that he might know where the other party went. Later, Wu Ming spoke to Hassan. After being rescued by me, is Smoky Drunk Hassan going to sneak into the sacred city? Hassan froze for a moment. then nodded. She does have such an idea, and she has already acted on it. For the problem of not being able to contact Smoky Drunk Hassan, in Hassan's view, it might be that Smoky Drunk Hassan had sneaked into the sacred city. However, Wu Ming's words made Hassan's. Smoky Drunk Hassan didn't sneak into the sacred city. She should have left. Left the arena? Hunter Faces Hassan did not react in time. Then, Wu Ming told Hassan what he heard from the refugees waiting at the sacred city gate for Saint Uplift. What those people said about killing a leader of the mountain people. I think this leader should be referring to Smoky Drunk Hassan. After all, other than Hassan, there was no one else who could be the leader of the mountain people. Is that so? Smoky Drunk has left. Hassan looked a little disappointed. After all, she was still a compatriot, and she was also a member of Hassan's family. She was closer to him than the other mountain people. But this is just my guess. After we find Chaldea's master, we will naturally know if it was Smoky Drunk Hassan who was killed at the sacred city gate. Wu Ming's words gave Hassan hope. That's true. Hassan nodded. Hassan had something to look forward to and a goal in his heart. In this way, it was beneficial to both Wu Ming and Hassan himself. This was conducive to finding Gadotsi as soon as possible. Villo, sir, I can almost guess where the master of Chaldea you mentioned is. After all, it was the person who defeated him easily, so Hassan awkwardly added the honorific sir. Just call me Villo. Wu Ming was uncomfortable with Hassan's awkward way of addressing him. Then, Wu Ming probed into Hassan's question of almost guessing where the master of Chaldea is. In fact, Wu Ming had guessed it too. The place you're talking about should be Cursed Wrist's village in the east. Gadotsi and the others must be with a certain Hassan in this mountain. However, Hassan said that there were only 4 Hassans left, and Quiet Hassan was captured and his fate was unknown. Smoky Drunk Hassan was also suspected to have left, and his fate was also unknown. Hassan did not know Gadotsi's whereabouts, so there was only Cursed Wrist Hassan left. I don't know if my luck is good or bad. Wu Ming smiled helplessly. He was lucky to find Hassan's village in a random search. However, Gadotsi seemed to be in another village, and this village was the final answer found by elimination. This could be called bad luck. However, I finally have a goal. This was considered a blessing in disguise. Then, Wu Ming looked at Hassan. You should know where Cursed Wrist Hassan's village is. Wu Ming's meaning was clear. He wanted Hassan to take him to Cursed Wrist Hassan's village in the east. Yes, Mr. Villo. I know the location of Cursed Wrist's village in the east. Hassan did not take Wu Ming's suggestion. He still called him sir. In fact, he had gotten used to it. Although Hassan nodded, he looked a little reserved, as if there was something hidden. You're worried about these villagers, aren't you? Wu Ming saw through Hassan's thoughts. Yes, Mr. Villo. The Knights of the Holy City have not given up on us. If I leave, I'm afraid that the Knights will attack while I'm away. When it came to the lives of her compatriots, Hassan would not be careless. Regarding this matter, I have a good idea, Wu Ming said as he looked at Gopril, who was behind him. Being stared at by Wu Ming like this, Gopril, who was humming a song, suddenly trembled. She stopped humming and froze on the spot. Wu Ming and Gopril stared at each other, and no one spoke first. When Hassan was about to lose his patience, Gopril spoke first. Master, you don't want me to stay here to protect these monkeys, do you? However, Wu Ming acted as if he had heard wrongly. He put his hand on Gopril's shoulder and patted her twice. As expected of Gopril, I'm glad that you're willing to stay. Hassan looked as if he had seen a ghost. Gopril did not refute because she knew that it was useless to refute. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming looked at Baijiu Hassan. In that case, Hassan, go communicate with the villagers. We'll depart immediately. Okay. Chapter 744. In the end, Gopril, who looked reluctant but could not say anything, stayed in the village where Hassan was, which was referred to as the West Village. To be safe, Wu Ming also left a bony thousands of meters above the West Village. At such a height, Wu Ming believed that no one would discover a bony. With a bounty protecting the West Village from above, Wu Ming believed that even if the Knights of the Round Table came, there would be no casualties. After that, Wu Ming and Hassan left the West Village and set foot on the road to the village where cursed Wrist Hassan was, which was referred to as the East Village. Starting from the West Village, almost an hour later, in the mountains near the East Village, a black assassin and a white knight leaped here. These two were Hassan and Wu Ming, who set foot on the road to the East Village. Because Hassan and Silent Wonder's agility was not low, the two of them were traveling at a very fast speed. On a slightly flat ground, Hassan, who was leading the way, stopped there. Like a chain reaction, Wu Ming naturally stopped as well. Mr. Villo, after crossing this mountain, we will reach the East Village. Hassan pointed to a small hill in front and explained to Wu Ming. Wu Ming nodded. In fact, 100 Faces Hassan's guidance was quite useful. The distance between the West Village and the East Village was not far, but the road between them was not so easy to walk. The mountains were steep, and the cliffs were steep. It was not easy to walk, or it was impossible to walk. Although Hassan led the way, this road was not impossible to walk, and reached a point where it was quite difficult to walk. It could be seen that Hassan played a considerable role. Of course, this so-called quite difficult to walk was only for Gadotsi. For Wu Ming, there was no place that was difficult to walk. Because Wu Ming did not rely on his legs to walk, but he used telekinesis to fly. However, Hassan was still a great help. So, Wu Ming thanked Hassan. Thank you for your hard work, Baijiu. However, Hassan shook his head as if he didn't care about Wu Ming's condolences. Immediately afterward, Hassan pleaded to Wu Ming. I have a request. I hope Mr. Villo can agree to it, please. It turned out that it was not that he did not care about Wu Ming's condolences, but he used this as a bargaining chip to ask for a favor from Wu Ming. For such a negotiation, Wu Ming did not mind, but Wu Ming would not simply agree to something unknown. First, tell me what you're here for. If it's part of my job, I definitely won't shirk from it. Hassan made his plea in a respectful tone. I hope you can rescue Tranquil Hassan. Tranquil Hassan, one of the 4 existing Hassans, was captured by the Knights of the Holy City, and his fate was unknown. This is not a problem, but do you know where Tranquil Hassan is now? Also, can you be sure that Tranquil Hassan is still alive? Saving people was naturally not a problem, but Wu Ming did not know Tranquil Hassan's current location. More importantly, whether Tranquil Hassan had already left. If the safety of Tranquil Hassan could not be guaranteed, then all this plan would become a dream. It's good that you can agree. Naturally, there is no problem with your 2 requests. There was a hint of joy on Hassan's face. Hassan did not care about Wu Ming's 2 questions. He only cared about whether Wu Ming would agree. I know Tranquil Hassan's location. It is a fortress used by the Knights of the Holy City to suppress mortals, and I can guarantee Tranquil Hassan's safety 100%. She has never left. Wu Ming was naturally puzzled by Hyuga Hassan's confident tone. Without needing Wu Ming to ask, Hassan gave an explanation himself. In fact, the reason why the other Hassans left was not because they were killed, but because they chose to commit suicide. Then, these Hassans did not take away the Knights of the Round Table. And Tranquil Hassan was in a powerless state when she was captured, so she could not die with the enemy and could only be captured by the enemy. So that's how it is. Wu Ming immediately understood. It was not easy to catch a follower. It would be unwise not to capture her and torture her for information. That was why Hassan said that Tranquil Hassan's safety was guaranteed. So, will Tranquil Hassan try to commit suicide? Wu Ming asked again. After all, the previous Hassans were trying to perish together with the enemy in the end. It seemed that they were not willing to fall into the hands of the enemy. So, will Tranquil Hassan commit suicide in prison? Wu Ming would not doubt that Hassan did not have the means to commit suicide. The reason why the assassin was called an assassin was that he could kill others and himself. An assassin who couldn't even "I'll kill myself" was a little unqualified. So, in order to prevent the enemy from extracting information and not to let himself suffer, Tranquil Hassan should take advantage of the gap to commit suicide in prison. However, Hassan shook his head and slapped Wu Ming's face. Unfortunately, because of Tranquil Hassan's physique, She can't commit suicide. Wu Ming didn't want to talk. Since it's a physique problem, there is no way, Wu Ming said. Let's go. After finding the chica, I will rescue Tranquil Hassan as soon as possible. Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Villo. Then, the two went over the mountain and came to the back of the mountain. A village that was the same as West Village appeared in front of Wu Ming. It was also a small village built by the mountain and located on a small flatland. People in Middle Eastern costumes were busy. Although they were poor, everyone's face was full of smiles. Like the villagers of West Village, the villagers of East Village did not give up because of the war, but worked hard to live for tomorrow. This unique spirit that belonged to humans was what Wu Ming liked the most. "You, are you Lord 100 Faces?" Suddenly, a voice came into Wu Ming's ears and pulled Wu Ming back to reality. A woman at the entrance of the village was standing there, looking at Wu Ming and Hassan, who were standing not far away from the village entrance. "Yes, is Cursed Wrist in the village?" Hassan asked gently. It seemed that when facing her compatriots, Hassan would become extraordinarily gentle. "Yes, Lord 100 Faces, Lord Cursed Wrist, is in the village at the moment." "Also welcome, Lord 100 Faces," the woman greeted respectfully. Wu Ming could see that this was not respect between superiors and subordinates, but respect for the person who worshipped. This is... At this time, the woman also noticed Wu Ming and asked in a panic, "My name is Villo Saransword. I am a knight, but I am not your enemy, so please don't panic, madam." Wu Ming elegantly performed a knight's salute to the woman and eased the atmosphere. "A knight belonging to our people. What a coincidence! There are also two in our village." Hearing Wu Ming's words, the woman's face regained a smile. Then, Wu Ming frowned because she said that there were two knights. Chapter 745. According to the words of the woman in front of him, Wu Ming could judge that there was a knight-type servant in this village. If there was no accident, it should be Matthew. In this way, he could also confirm that Gadotsi and Da Vinci were here. However, the two knights part did not make sense in any case. Among Chaldea's group, only Matthew was a knight-type servant. Whether it was Da Vinci who came this time or Pamilia who did not come this time, they were not knight-type servants. One of the knights was Matthew. So who was the other knight? Was it a mole from the enemy? Or was it a new servant summoned by Gadotsi? Or was it a lone servant? Wait a minute. There are knights in your village? Compared to Wu Ming's silent frown, Hassan was much more direct and directly expressed his doubts. Because of the continuous deaths of his compatriots, Hassan was full of malice toward the knights. Previously, when Hugo Hassan faced Wu Ming, he was filled with disgust. If it weren't for the fact that he spent a little physical effort, Hugo Hassan wouldn't talk to Wu Ming so amiably and walk together. Wu Ming proved that he was a good knight, but this was only for Wu Ming alone. For other knights, Hassan still maintained his previous attitude, extreme disgust. Yes, the two knights and Lady Cursed Wrist escorted the compatriots who fled from the holy city to the village, so Lady Cursed Wrist left them behind. The woman saw the displeasure on Hugo Hassan's face and quickly explained, fearing that Hugo Hassan would be angry. At the same time, Wu Ming put his hand on Hassan's shoulder and said to Hassan in a voice so small that the woman in front of him could not hear it, "Don't be angry. Let's see the situation first." After all, Wu Ming should be more anxious. Unknown people mixed in with Gadotsi. How could Wu Ming not be anxious? However, no matter what, he had to remain calm. Anger would spoil things. "Then, madam, can you take us to see the two knights? Maybe the two knights you mentioned are people I know." Wu Ming had a sincere smile on his face as he looked at the woman. Okay. The woman blushed slightly and nodded. Wu Ming was then looked down upon by Hassan. Wu Ming expressed that he was also very helpless. As a Round Table cowherd, a member of the Knights of the Round Table, Wu Ming's appearance was naturally online. It was not that Wu Ming deliberately flirted with her. Wu Ming was completely unjustly implicated. However, Hassan would not be so considerate of Wu Ming. He only knew that Wu Ming had just molested his compatriot. After the farce, The woman took Wu Ming and Hassan to a rather simple house. Although it was simple compared with other houses, it was actually luxurious enough. It may be because this house was more luxurious than other houses, so it was arranged for Gadotsi and the others to live in. "This is it, Sir Villo, Sir Hundred Faces," the woman said respectfully to Wu Ming and Hundred Faces. "Well, you don't have to worry about us. Go to your work first," Hassan said. Although it was not a village, Hassan was also a local, so she clearly knew that the villagers had things to do during the day. In a chaotic world, it was impossible to have leisure time. Only sleeping time at night could be counted as rest time. The woman did have something to do. After saying goodbye to Wu Ming and Hassan, she left. Master Chaldea's servant is a knight. After the woman left, Hassan looked at Wu Ming. Wu Ming did not tell Hassan the specific situation, just told him that he hoped to find Chaldea's master. Hassan did not ask much about Chaldea's master that Wu Ming said. So now, Hassan was slightly surprised to know that the person Wu Ming was looking for was a knight-type servant. Tachika's servant is a sub-servant possessed by Galahad, so it is not wrong to say that Matthew is a knight. Wu Ming explained to Hassan, "One of the two knights should be Matthew, but I have no clue about the other one." Wu Ming frowned. "In other words, is it an enemy?" Hassan's body tensed up and looked at the house in front of him with hostility. "It's not certain whether it is a knight of the holy city. Don't rush to a conclusion." Wu Ming shook his head. "That's true." Although Hassan said so, the vigilance of his body still did not weaken. As an assassin, he would not relax his vigilance because it's not certain, because it would kill him quickly. "Let's go in and have a look," Wu Ming said and walked in. At this time, a voice suddenly came from behind the two. "Senior Villo?" Wu Ming was happy when he heard the voice. It was Matthew's voice. Sure enough, Gadotsi and Matthew came to this village. When Wu Ming was about to turn his head, Hassan, who turned his head ahead of Wu Ming, exclaimed, "It's you." "Yeah." Turning his head, Wu Ming looked at Ma Shu, who was smiling awkwardly, and Hassan, who had an angry look on his face. However, there was one thing that he could still see, and that was that there seemed to be some misunderstanding between the Hundred Faces Hassan and Gadotsi. Right, the desert. Wu Ming suddenly remembered what Gadotsi told him about what happened in the desert. They met Hassan, the man in black who kidnapped Pharaoh Nidicles, and they scared him away with Matthew's shield. Although the other party thought that Matthew was a holy city knight and retreated. But this was not the point. The point was that Hassan, the man in black who retreated, was Hassan. So, this grudge had already been formed. Well, I should have explained it to Hugo Hassan first. At this time, a sister-like voice came from the house behind Wu Ming and Hassan. Isn't this the Villo? You found us so quickly." Wu Ming looked back and saw Mona Lisa, wearing blue and red clothes and holding a mechanical staff, standing at the door. Da Vinci. Wu Ming was not surprised, but now the focus was not on Da Vinci, but on the angry Hassan. As if he couldn't feel the anxious atmosphere at the scene, Da Vinci smiled and corrected Wu Ming's name. "It's Da Vinci." The serious atmosphere was broken in an instant, and Matthew was a little overwhelmed. Even Hassan looked at Da Vinci speechlessly. But Da Vinci's help was good, and Wu Ming seized the opportunity to hold Hassan's shoulder and said to Hassan, "Anyway, let's go into the house first." Hassan of the Hundred Faces nodded. She compromised. After all, she couldn't beat Wu Ming. Chapter 746. Although the house looked quite simple from the outside, Wu Ming found an unusual scene when he came into the room. In a room similar to a living room, the windows that were developed and transformed captured the light, filling the living room with light. The walls were dyed white, and Wu Ming, who had a good sense of smell, realized that it was modern paint. The floor was not land, but some marble-like stone bricks. There were neat and obvious gaps between the stone bricks, and there was no doubt that it was just laid. There was nothing extra in the neat living room. Only a wooden table that served as a coffee table and two wooden chairs that looked like modern wooden sofas. Wu Ming and Hassan sat on one of the wooden chairs. Matthew and Da Vinci sat on the other wooden chair, and the four of them looked at each other silently. Hassan stared at Matthew, Matthew lowered his head and looked embarrassed. Da Vinci kept smiling and did nothing, and Wu Ming looked at the room. It can't be helped, such a modern design that is not in line with this era. I'm afraid only Da Vinci can do it. In other words, only Da Vinci would be bored enough to renovate a temporary house, and it seems that the renovation is not complete yet. After all, I'm a genius. I can't help but fix a house like this. Da Vinci explained to Wu Ming, who was looking around. Wu Ming looked at Da Vinci helplessly, then asked, "By the way, where did Tachika go?" After being invited into the house by Da Vinci, Wu Ming did not see Gadotsi. After using his spiritual perception, Wu Ming found that Gadotsi was indeed not there. She and cursed Risthasen went to help the villagers, so they're not here, Da Vinci explained with a smile. Not only did Gadotsi go to help the villagers, but so did Matthew. When he met Matthew outside the house, Matthew was holding a pile of hay in his hands. Now the hay was put in a room in the house by Matthew. In other words, only Da Vinci is slacking off, right? Wu Ming stated the truth rather calmly. Ma Shu, who lowered her head in embarrassment, raised her head and nodded. Mama, Da Vinci laughed. Leonardo da Vinci himself almost transformed this house into his own workshop, Matthew complained as a Chaldea employee. Cough, cough. Dear Villo, is there anything you don't understand? The genius Da Vinci will personally explain it to you for free. Da Vinci, who realized that he would lose face if he continued, decisively changed the topic. Although Gadotsi wasn't here, Leonardo da Vinci could explain it clearly. So, what exactly happened since you left for the Holy City? Please tell me about it. Yes, Da Vinci's lecture is starting. With that said, Da Vinci took out a pair of glasses from somewhere and put them on his eyes. Gadotsi, Matthew, and Da Vinci arrived at the Holy City in Da Vinci's car. After identifying themselves, the gatekeeper of the Holy City said, "Please wait for a moment. I need to report." However, in the process of waiting, the holy selection happened to begin. Gadotsi and her party naturally couldn't tolerate Gawain's behavior of slaughtering the refugees, so they fought against Gawain and the Solemn Knights. However, Matthew and Da Vinci naturally couldn't rescue the refugees alone, but fortunately, Gadotsi and the others had help. They happened to meet Knight Lucius, who had helped Gadotsi and the others in the desert, and Drunk Smokehasen, who wanted to sneak into the Holy City. In the end, Drunk Smokehasen risked his life to help Gadotsi and the others stop Gawain. After Lucius and Matthew jointly repelled the Solemn Knights, they successfully bought time for the refugees to escape. Hearing this, the atmosphere around Hundred Faces Hasen seemed to be lonely. Is that so? Drunk Smokehasen has already left. After that, Hundred Faces Hasen didn't say anything else. By the way, Hundred Faces Hasen also put on the skull mask that Wu Ming had returned to her. Anyone could tell that Hundred Faces Hasen was in a bad mood, so Da Vinci continued to explain. According to Drunk Smoke Hassan's instructions, we covered the refugees and came here. We also encountered cursed Rist Hasen, who was sneaking in the mountains. Then, Da Vinci had a that was close. In the end, we were almost caught by a knight we had never seen before. It was really thrilling. That knight should be Lancelot. Other than Drunk Smokehasen and Knight Lucius, is there no one else? Wu Ming asked. After all, Azrael must have fought with Gawain, and Lancelot also said that he encountered the green-haired angel. Did she not appear in front of Gadotsi and the others? The knight who was chasing us was indeed attacked, but because it was too far away, we didn't see the situation clearly. Matthew took over Da Vinci and explained to Wu Ming. Matthew and Gadotsi didn't see it clearly. Wu Ming believed it, but Da Vinci might have seen it. Wu Ming looked at Da Vinci vaguely, and then Wu Ming found Da Vinci looking at him with a smile. Then, Wu Ming calmly moved his head away. Maybe Da Vinci saw it. Wu Ming had a feeling that Da Vinci's smile, just now, contained something. Azrael appeared in front of Da Vinci, and Da Vinci also knew that Azrael was Wu Ming's subordinate. If she saw Azrael, then it was normal to guess that it was Wu Ming. However, judging from Matthew's performance, Azrael did not seem to appear in front of Gadotsi and the others so far. Although Da Vinci vaguely knew, This was in line with Wu Ming's warning to Azrael, don't show up easily. Then, Azrael should be around now. Wu Ming thought so and looked out the window. At this moment, a feather fell from the window. Wu Ming's eyes suddenly shrank. It was a feather of the skywing species. Sure enough, Azrael was nearby. Wu Ming vaguely glanced at Hassan and Matthew, but neither of them noticed it. Then Wu Ming vaguely looked at Da Vinci again and found that Da Vinci was looking at him with a smile. This guy definitely noticed. Wu Ming's expression did not change at all, but he was shocked. I'm a genius. Da Vinci cast such a meaningful look at Wu Ming. Then, Da Vinci did not care about Wu Ming and continued his speech. Among the casualties this time, only smoke-drunk Hassan was a follower. As for the ordinary people, there were more than a dozen refugees who were not saved by us at the beginning. Most of the refugees were saved. Although Lancelot almost caught up with them in the end, the overall situation was not that bad. Seeing that Da Vinci did not mean to expose Wu Ming simply did not care. At this point, the story of Chaldea's party was over, and the next thing was what happened now. It's been hard on you, Matthew, Wu Ming said to Matthew. Although Da Vinci didn't say it that hard, Wu Ming didn't think that Matthew and the others had it easy. Hey, no, in fact, I didn't have it hard, but Mr. Lucius had it harder. Miss Hassan even sacrificed her life because of this, Matthew said and stopped. Hassan, who seemed to have a good relationship with smoke-drunk Hassan, was still here. It was not good to talk too much. Looking at Hassan, who did not move, Matthew was relieved. By the way, why didn't I see Lucius? Wu Ming asked. It seemed that the second knight follower was Lucius. However, Wu Ming's sixth sense told him that the identity of Lucius was not simple. Chapter 747. Is it Mr. Lucius? If it's him, he should be helping the villagers now. Matthew pondered. After all, Mashu was separated from her beloved senior, and it was unlikely that she would know the location of Lucius. He's in the village. I'll look for him. Don't worry about me. Wu Ming greeted and disappeared. Wu Ming was also a follower, so naturally, he could still do spiritual transformation. Only Da Vinci, Matthew, and 100 Faces Hassan were left in the room. Oh, it seems that there are some contradictions between us, Da Vinci said to 100 Faces Hassan with a cheeky smile. Why was that? Because after Wu Ming left, 100 Faces Hassan's eyes had been fixed on Da Vinci and Matthew. Unlike Da Vinci, Matthew was a good boy. In any case, in the desert, they did hinder 100 Faces Hassan's work. Therefore, Mashu wanted to apologize to him. That, Miss Hayakuga, about what happened in the desert, Mashu said apologetically. However, before Matthew could finish, 100 Faces Hassan interrupted Matthew. No need to say more. Because of the mask, Matthew couldn't see 100 Faces Hassan's face, nor could he see her eyes. He only knew that 100 Faces Hassan's voice was quite cold. Matthew was quite nervous. In her opinion, this negotiation was messed up. At the same time, 100 Faces Hassan continued to speak. You did hinder me from kidnapping the Sun King's pharaoh, but this time you saved my compatriots, and we're even. Huh? Matthew was taken aback. Although 100 Faces Hassan's voice was still cold, the words he said gave Matthew warmth. But Miss Smoke-Drunk Hassan Matthew was speechless. In the end, they didn't save Smoke-Drunk Hassan. In the end, they relied on Smoke-Drunk Hassan's cover to successfully leave. Although it seemed that Drunk Smoke Hassan was trying to cover for the refugees to leave, Matthew and the others were also beneficiaries. Matthew felt guilty for abandoning his allies and escaping. That is Drunk Smoke's choice. I respect her choice. At the same time, I will also believe in the people she trusts. That's great, Miss Yagami. Thank you for your forgiveness and trust. Matthew was pleasantly surprised. No matter who was in the wrong, Matthew would be happy to see whoever apologized first and reached a peaceful ending. All right, reunion. Da Vinci, who had already seen through everything, celebrated with a smile. However, at this moment, the eyes of the 100 Faces Hassan's skull mask glowed. However, that doesn't mean that I've forgiven you for what you did to me in the desert. At that time, the The 100 Faces Hassan took the initiative to retreat when he saw the pattern on Matthew's shield. This was a nicer way to put it, but a less pleasant way to put it was scared away. This was a matter of Hassan's reputation. He had to get it back. This was a matter of the reputation of the first Hassan who founded the Old Man of the Mountain Cult. Well, he was definitely not worried about being cut down. Matthew was taken aback, and then he put on a look that looked like he was about to cry. The atmosphere instantly became cold again. Click! At this moment, the door opened. I heard from the villagers that Assassin is here. Where is he? Where is he? The voice was heard before the person was seen. After the voice reached everyone's ears, the red-haired figure came into view. Gadotsi, who walked into the room, looked around and did not notice the atmosphere at all. Master, please pay attention to the atmosphere. Cursed Wrist Hassan, who came with Gadotsi and was still standing outside the door, reminded her softly and kindly. After Cursed Wrist Hassan's reminder, Gadotsi also realized the problem. Then Gadotsi touched her red hair and looked at everyone with a laugh. Ugh. Did I miss something? This made 100 Faces Hassan shake his head helplessly. With such a master around, he could not maintain the cold atmosphere. However, this was a pretty good master. On the other side, Wuming, who was missed by Gadotsi, was now wearing the silver-white armor and walking in the village. Because the news that a good knight who knew the two knights had come to the village, the villagers did not make a fuss about Wuming. This was also the reason why Wuming did not change his clothes. An armored knight with a known identity was better than an unknown person wearing ordinary clothes. The latter might cause trouble, so Wuming simply did not change his clothes. Moreover, he was now summoned as a Villo Knight. Ignoring the curious gazes of the villagers, Wuming kept a smile and walked around the village a little, but he did not find the Lucius that Matthew mentioned. Coincidentally, Wuming found the woman he met at the entrance of the village. Hence, Wuming hurriedly walked up to the woman with the standard smile of a round-table bull, Knight of the Knights, and started a conversation with the woman. We meet again, Mayam. I have something to ask. I don't know if it will cause you any trouble. No. How could it be? The woman blushed and nodded. I want to ask where Knight Lucius is. He might be an acquaintance of mine. I want to talk to him, but I don't see him in the village, so I want to ask. Wuming asked in an extremely gentle tone, which made the woman feel a little smug. Mayam, Wuming responded and pulled the woman back to reality. Yes. Okay, Mr. Villo. The Knight Lucius you're looking for is now at the cliff over there. The woman pointed to the direction Wuming. Thank you, Mayam. Wuming thanked her. Although he did not have any sleeves, he still left like a cloud. After knowing the destination, Wuming walked over slowly. Wuming always felt that Lucius was not the other party's real name, but a fake name. As for why, Wuming could only answer intuition. Wuming's intuition was always accurate, so Wuming believed in his intuition. The woman did not lie to Wuming. Sure enough, Wuming found a knight wearing a white hooded cloak on the edge of a cliff. This Lucius took off the hood, and the silver-white ponytail fluttered behind Lucius. Although the back was facing, the silver hair gave people a feeling that the opposite party was very good-looking. Seeing this scene, Wuming did not have any other feelings, only sure enough. It's really you, Minister Bedivere. Chapter 748. After hearing Wuming's voice, the knight who called himself Lucius was stunned. Then he slowly turned his head. A delicate and pretty face that didn't look like a knight entered Silent Cry's eyes. Sir Villo, he said in an inexplicable tone with excitement. Looking at this familiar face, coupled with the way the other party addressed him, Wuming was completely sure that the other party was the knight he was familiar with and also witnessed the end of King Arthur, Bedivere. I didn't expect to see you here. Bedivere knelt on one knee and said to Wuming. However, Wuming controlled his spirit force to pull up Bedivere, who had not yet knelt down. You're always like this. I remember I said more than once that the person you need to kneel to is my king. Wu Ming shook his head helplessly. Because of Wu Ming's strength, reputation, and the knight's awe of Wu Ming, plus the relationship between Wu Ming and Artoria, Bedivere would want to salute Wu Ming every time he saw Wu Ming. However, Wu Ming also told Bedivere more than once, or every time, there was no need to treat him like this. Although Bedivere would agree verbally, it would still be the same the next time they met. It had become a habit. However, seeing Bedivere like this made Wu Ming quite nostalgic. Yes, I understand, Sir Villo. Bedivere stood up and replied, but it was estimated that he would forget again next time. You, on the other hand, should have already predicted my arrival. In the end, you still put on a very surprised look. Wu Ming teased. However, Bedivere shook his head. No, how could it be? Although I knew about your news from Miss Fujimaru, and I did think about the scene of meeting you, I didn't expect to meet you at this moment. After all, from the information he learned from Gadatsi, Wu Ming should still be in the sky fortress summoned from another world, a Bont. He didn't expect a Bont to be able to move, and move so fast that he could meet Wu Ming in these mountains. Wu Ming chuckled. Then, with a casual point of his finger, 2 stone stools appeared on the spot. Sit down and talk. Wu Ming sat on one of the stone benches and looked at Bedivere. Yes, Bedivere, like obeying the words of his boss, sat on the stone bench next to Wu Ming. The two looked into the distance together. The beautiful sky made people forget to go back. However, this did not prevent Wu Ming and Bedivere. How much do you know about my king? Wu Ming asked without looking back. Bedivere was silent for a few seconds and then replied, Everything. After saying that, Bedivere lowered his head in guilt. Hearing Bedivere's inexplicable answer, Wu Ming didn't have the slightest bit of confusion. On the contrary, he had already understood the whole story. The Holy Sword was not returned to the Lake Sprite, so King Arthur did not die. Without the Holy Sword, he picked up the Holy Spear and finally became the king of the undead walking on the earth, the Lion King, and came to this singularity. In the story of King Arthur, it was Knight Bedivere who was responsible for returning the Holy Sword. In addition, Bedivere did not respond to the Lion King's summon, so the matter naturally happened to Bedivere. You came here because you want to return the Holy Sword to my king. Wu Ming thought of the information provided by Da Vinci. They met the help of Lucius, who wanted to sneak into the Holy City at the gate of the Holy City. What was the purpose of sneaking into the Holy City? Naturally, it was impossible to assassinate the Lion King. Combined with Bedivere's identity, only returning the Holy Sword was in line with what he wanted to do. Yes, you are right, Sir Villo. I must return the Holy Sword to my king. This is my sin, my responsibility. Bedivere's expression looked somewhat guilty. Looking at the guilty Bedivere, Wu Ming was attracted by Bedivere's right hand. Originally, Bedivere's right arm should have been empty, but now there was an extra silver white arm. With Wu Ming's knowledge, at such a close distance, he could naturally see what the extra silver arm was. It was the Holy Sword that changed its shape and effect. This is Merlin's technique. Without guessing, Wu Ming knew that it was Merlin's doing. Wu Ming once again thought of Merlin's expression when he told him about the Uruk singularity. That despicable face made it clear that Merlin must be up to something again, and Bedivere was probably one of the things that Merlin did. Wu Ming even thought that he was one of the things that Merlin did. You are right. Because His Excellency Merlin couldn't leave the Forbidden Tower, he helped me inlay this arm and guided me here. Bedivere held his right arm with a face full of responsibility. However, immediately after, Bedivere relaxed. However, since you are here, Sir Villo, I don't think I'm needed. I don't think so. Without waiting for Bedivere to finish, Wu Ming directly interrupted him. Wu Ming looked at Bedivere's somewhat surprised eyes and said, Whether as my king's subject or as an atonement, you have the need to return the Holy Sword to my king in person. Bedivere lowered his head guiltily. I chose the wrong path again. I'm sorry, Sir Villo. However, Wu Ming just smiled. With me helping you from behind, it'll be fine as long as you have the courage to try. This was one of the reasons why the Knights of the Round Table admired Wu Ming. He could always help the knights when they were on the wrong path. Not only for the knights, but Wu Ming was also the same for Artoria. If it weren't for Wu Ming being weak at that time and being sent away by Morgan Le Fay, the Arthur dynasty would not have collapsed, but would have been pulled back by Wu Ming. Yes, Sir Villo, thank you very much. Bedivere smiled. With Wu Ming, he seemed to have a backbone, as if he had 100% confidence in saving the king. The British Silver Dragon not only guarded the territory of Britain, but also the hearts of the people in the territory. By the way, this is for you, Wu Ming said. Golden ripples appeared beside him, and a bottle of red potion was spat out from the ripples. This is... Bedivere caught the red potion spat out from the golden ripples with a puzzled look. He couldn't understand what it was. If it was Merlin, he should be able to understand it. Bedivere thought so. A potion to restore vitality. Your body is full of holes. Although it can't cure the symptoms, at least it can make you feel better. Chapter 749. Bedivere was stunned. Sure enough, how could he hide his physical condition from Mr. Villo? Mr. Villo can see it. Wu Ming nodded as a matter of course. I can see it. Whether it's the truth that you're not a servant, but a human, or the truth that the arm is constantly destroying your body, I can see it. Wu Ming sighed. It's been hard for you for nearly 1,000 years, Bedivere. Although it was not clear what Bedivere had experienced in the past 1,000 years, Wu Ming knew that it must be a bad feeling. I don't feel pain, Mr. Villo. This is what I should bear. Bedivere smiled at Wu Ming. The strength of the heart was more important than the strength of the body. Nearly 1,000 years had worn away Bedivere's body, but Bedivere's heart was not shaken at all. He had been looking for King Arthur, looking for the king of the undead who walked on the earth because of his mistake. His ultimate goal was to make up for his mistakes. I'm used to the pain of the body. Bedivere's eyes flashed with hope that would not be extinguished. It was a strong hope to redeem Artoria. As long as there was a goal and did not give up, mortals could be compared to gods. Wu Ming smiled. This was the Bedivere he knew. This was the Bedivere he knew. This was the Knight of the Round Table. But it's still the same sentence. Since I'm here, it's okay to relax a little. Yes, Mr. Villo, I will rely on you. Bedivere nodded, then opened the red potion given by Wu Ming and drank it. But then Bedivere's eyes widened. This potion, Wu Ming looked at him doubtfully. Was there a problem with this potion? Impossible, right? It seems a bit sweet. Bedivere said thoughtfully. Wu Ming smiled helplessly. This guy, as always, made jokes that he didn't realize. Assassin. At this time, Gadotzi's voice came from a distance behind. Tachika is here. Wu Ming looked behind him. Gadotzi was running toward here. Then, Wu Ming stood up and looked at Bedivere beside him. Then, let's go Knight Lucius. Since Bedivere intended to hide his identity, Wu Ming would not ask more, and he would not uncover Bedivere's true identity. After all, this kind of thing should be explained by the person himself. Wu Ming wouldn't cross the line, not to mention that Bedivere was one of his own. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he walked towards the direction where Gadotzi came from. Lucius. Bedivere shook his head. This name was only given because of his relationship with the Silver Right Hand, so it didn't matter if his identity was exposed or not. At the gate of the Holy City, if Drunk Hassan hadn't risked his life to hold Gawain back, he would have been exposed at that time. But thanks to Drunk Hassan's cover, most of the refugees were successfully rescued by Matthew and Bedivere. In fact, if Bedivere was there, Drunk Hassan might not have died. His right hand restrained the Knights of the Round Table who were endowed with the blessing of the Holy Grail, so Gawain couldn't do anything to him. But he couldn't take down Gawain either. However, in that case, the number of rescued refugees may be reduced. Drunk Hassan did not have the silver arm like Bedivere. Bedivere was more efficient in defeating the Solemn Knight. But even so, the result was still uncertain. Maybe none of them could escape at that time. And the past can't be changed, only made up. So Bedivere was not going to regret it, but he was going to take more care of these villagers. Standing up, Bedivere turned and walked back along Wu Ming's path. From a distance, he saw Gadotzi throw herself into Wu Ming's arms. Bedivere had never seen Gadotzi throw herself into anyone's arms, so he was a little surprised. Is the relationship between Sir Fujimaru and Villo so good? The atmosphere between the two looks like siblings. Bedivere's first thought was not a couple, but a brother and sister. If it weren't for the hair color, face shape, and timeline, Bedivere might really think that Wuming and Gadatsi were siblings. Shaking his head, Bedivere strolled over and stopped 5 meters away from the two. After all, he was not like Mordred. He was very good at reading the atmosphere. At this time, Gadatsi and Wuming also separated and talked. I'm sorry, assassin. We failed to live up to the task you entrusted to us. We couldn't enter the holy city and be your ambassador. Gadatsi lowered her head with some guilt. But you saved a lot of human beings. I'm very satisfied that you could make the choice you thought was right at that time. Wuming rubbed Gadatsi's little head and comforted her. That's right. I guess that assassin would say that. Gadatsi raised her head, and the gloomy look disappeared in an instant. Wuming laughed involuntarily and put on a "I was fooled by you" look. Well, it's not that Wuming deliberately pretended to be deceived. He's just spoiling Gadatsi. Senpai, in the distance, Matthew panted and shouted as he ran over. Oh, Matthew! Gadatsi waved to Matthew. Not only that, but Matthew was followed by Cursed Wrist Hassan, Hyuga Hassan, and Da Vinci. Cursed Wrist Hassan, 100 Faces Hassan, and Mashu ran over, but Da Vinci walked over at a leisurely pace. Senpai Villo, Mr. Lucius, hello. Matthew, who arrived in front of Gadatsi first, greeted Wuming and Lucius. Is Mr. Lucius here? I didn't see him just now. Gadatsi scratched the back of her head embarrassedly. Don't worry about me, Mr. Fujimaru. However, Bedivere shook his head. He didn't care if he was noticed or not. But you, senpai, you ran too fast. Matthew looked depressed. After learning from Da Vinci that Wuming went to find Lucius, Gadatsi ran out quickly. Although she and Cursed Wrist Hassan quickly followed, they were still left behind by Gadatsi. Gadatsi, who looked around, finally learned about Wuming's whereabouts from a woman with a rather rosy face. Hyuga Hassan, who joined the search for Gadatsi, saw Gadatsi. After informing Cursed Wrist Hassan and Matthew, they all followed her. As for Da Vinci, he was just watching. Seeing so many people, Wuming simply stopped chatting with Gadatsi. Everyone, I have something to say. Wuming spoke. He was ready to explain what was going to happen next. Looking around at everyone, Wuming continued. I already have a preliminary plan. Chapter 750. Because of Wuming, everyone came to the residence of Gadatsi and others, ready to discuss Wuming's plan. Because of this, Bedivere did not clarify his identity to Gadatsi and others. But identity or not, it didn't matter to Gadatsi. Whether it was Lucius or Bedivere, they were all good people who helped them, weren't they? In the room, a stone round table was placed in the center of the room, which was created by Wuming with Create Green item. When he saw this table, Bedivere was shocked because, except for some details and patterns, this was exactly Camelot's round table. But because Bedivere was currently concealing his identity, he controlled his expression very well. Everyone sat around the round table, sitting on a stone seat with a backrest like a throne made by Wuming, waiting for Wuming, who was sitting at the head of the table, to speak. This made Bedivere a little helpless. Wuming completely recreated the round table, and those seats were where the knights of the round table sat. But Bedivere just thought about it in his heart and did not say it out loud. Da Vinci was a little interested in the stone seat he was sitting on and the round table in front of him. He looked around as if he wanted to observe these arts. Although Gadatsi was not as serious as Da Vinci, she was also very interested in these stone seats and round tables. On the other hand, 100 Faces Hassan and Cursed Wrist Hassan sat upright with serious expressions. Matthew, on the other hand, looked quite nervous. Matthew knew that his servant was Galahad, but he didn't know that the table in front of him was a round table. He just felt nervous subconsciously. It seemed that it was because of Galahad that caused Matthew to have such a timid appearance. First of all, Tachika, I'll leave this to you. Wuming looked at Gadatsi. Then, golden ripples appeared beside Wuming, and a golden cup emerged from the ripples. "This is the Holy Grail," Matthew shouted excitedly. Except for Hassan, who had already seen it once, others were more or less surprised, especially Chaldea's group. There was no other reason, but the Holy Grail this time was too easy to obtain. "This is what I got from the Sun King, this special Holy Grail," Wu Ming said and threw it to Gadotsi. Hey, Gadotsi caught the Holy Grail rather agilely. After experiencing this kind of catching movement several times, Gadotsi was no longer the child who was easily flustered at the beginning. "Doctor, can you recover the Holy Grail?" Gadotsi raised her arm and asked the bracelet on her wrist. In response, the bracelet made a sound. "Just wait a moment, because I didn't expect you. I need to wait a moment." However, Roman's voice gave people the feeling that he was flustered. "Recovery is not urgent. Romani, can you identify this Holy Grail?" Da Vinci said to the air. Although Da Vinci was not close to Gadotsi, Romani, who was monitoring the scene, still heard Da Vinci's words. "Identification is still possible. I'll do it now." Roman's voice came from Gadotsi's bracelet. With the bracelet and the Holy Grail in such a close distance, identification was not a problem. Da Vinci knew this, so he made this request to Roman. And Da Vinci asked Roman to identify the Holy Grail, not because he did not trust Wu Ming, but because it was a necessary process. It was always right to be cautious, and Wu Ming agreed with this point, so Wu Ming did not say anything. "Identification is complete. It is indeed the Holy Grail, but..." Roman seemed to want to say something, but he hesitated. However, Roman still said it out loud. "Although it is the Holy Grail, it is still impossible to determine whether it is the Holy Grail that caused this singularity." Roman's tone was full of caution, as if he was afraid of offending people. "Doctor, this is the Holy Grail that Senior Villo painstakingly obtained from the Sun King. How can you have doubts?" Matthew righteously defended his senior. "I believe in Assassin. Since he said it is the Holy Grail of this singularity, then it must be." Gadotsi expressed her trust in Wu Ming. "Ah, Romani is being targeted." Da Vinci laughed in schadenfreude. "That's why I was considering whether to say it or not." Roman sighed helplessly. "However, it is not unreasonable to be cautious. Roman having such a guess makes me happy." Seeing Roman so embarrassed and helpless, Wu Ming could not help but help him find a way out. Wu Ming changed his tone and continued to speak. "However, whether this Holy Grail is the Holy Grail that caused this singularity or not, it has no impact on our next plan." "Oh, did you find something unusual?" Da Vinci looked at Wu Ming curiously. Wu Ming nodded, as if it was a matter of course. "The safety of this singularity is now in the hands of the Lion King. She has the power to destroy this singularity and also the power to destroy this singularity." Because Artoria hid something from Wu Ming guessed that what Artoria hid was the most important thing. Maybe it was related to the safety of this singularity. Indeed, in this way, whether this Holy Grail is the Holy Grail that caused this singularity or not is meaningless. Roman understood what Wu Ming meant. If this singularity was affected by the Lion King, then even if the Holy Grail was recovered, it would not be able to completely save this singularity. Others also understood this truth. "Then what we need to do now is to defeat the Lion King," Bedivere asked. After all, if it was Artoria that caused this singularity, then it must be Bedivere's doing. Therefore, to defeat the king and bring the king back to the right path, he had to do his part. Although things are not completely clear yet, it is certain that we are currently hostile to the Lion King. Wu Ming did not answer Bedivere's question. In short, let's gather our forces first. Wu Ming's words made everyone realize. Indeed, other than Wu Ming who could fight, no one here could compete with the Knights of the Round Table one-on-one. Hassan was an assassin, Da Vinci was a magician, and Matthew was a defender. There was no way they could compete with the Knights in frontal combat. My Skywing Legion can only be used as a one-time use Joker card due to Fury, so we still lack a critical force. Wu Ming said as he looked at cursed wrist Hassan. "The critical force you were talking about, could it be seeing that cursed wrist Hassan understood what he meant, Wu Ming smiled. Yes, it's what you think. Chapter 751. Excuse me. What exactly are Senior Villo and Mr. Cursing Wrist talking about? Matthew, being a curious child, asked. And the person who answered Matthew was Hundred Faces Hassan. They should be talking about the first Hassan. However, Hundred Faces Hassan seemed to be in a bad mood at the moment, and his words were a little harsh. Yes, the key force I'm talking about is the original Hassan, the first Hassan who is known as the King of Hassan. Wu Ming nodded without delving into Hundred Faces Hassan's tone. Oh, isn't that King Hassan? It feels so cool. Gadotsi leaned forward and looked at Wu Ming with an excited look. Because the content of the previous discussion was not familiar to Hundred Faces Hassan and Cursing Wrist Hassan, the two of them did not interrupt before. But now that they were talking about things they were familiar with, Hundred Faces Hassan and Cursing Wrist Hassan began to explain to everyone. The first Hassan, that is the most mysterious Hassan. No one knows whether it is a man or a woman, and no one can catch its trace. Even the people who are targeted by the first Hassan may not be able to see it before they die. After Cursing Wrist Hassan finished speaking, everyone except Hundred Faces Hassan and Wu Ming had a surprised expression. Doesn't that mean that the first Hassan's assassination technique has reached the point of being amazing? Matthew explained his understanding. At this time, on Gadotsi's bracelet, Roman and Chaldea also made a sound. Matthew's understanding is indeed correct. I checked the information and found that there are very few descriptions of the first Hassan in the information. Other than the simple founder of the Elders of the Mountain and Hassan who killed Hassan, there are basically no other records. Huh, so mysterious? Matthew was stunned. This seemed to be a big shot. As a magician, Matthew clearly realized that the more mysterious something was, the more powerful it was. For such a mysterious first-generation Hassan, Mashu felt that the other party may be a super powerful person. Although I agree with Mashu's words, I'm more concerned about the Hassan who killed Hassan. Da Vinci suddenly said, why? Gadotsi was puzzled. We'll have to answer that question, said Cursed Wrist Hassan. Knowing that Chaldea came from the future, Hassan the All-Seeing and Cursed Wrist Hassan were not surprised that the other party knew about Hassan's secret. Following Cursed Wrist Hassan's words, Hundred Faces Hassan continued. The so-called first Hassan who kills Hassan is because the first Hassan will behead the other Hassans when they go astray. Going astray, Matthew murmured thoughtfully. Continuing Hassan's words, Cursed Wrist Hassan said again. Although that's what they say, in reality, there are very few Hassans who have been beheaded by the first generation. After all, the Elders of the Mountain don't act for selfish reasons, so it's unlikely that we'll be beheaded by the first generation, Hassan, the All-Seeing, finally added. In other words, it was basically impossible to encounter them. Then how do we find the first Hassan? Gadotsi slumped on the table, looking powerless. After all, whether it was Roman's statement that the first Hassan was extremely mysterious, or Hassan, the All-Seeing and Cursed Wrist Hassan's statement that it was almost impossible to meet them, it meant that the first Hassan was not easy to find. However, the corner of Wu Ming's mouth began to twitch slightly. The first Hassan came to him and slashed him. So, we need Cursed Wrist Hassan's help, Wu Ming said as he looked at Cursed Wrist Hassan. At the same time, everyone followed Wu Ming's gaze and looked at Cursed Wrist Hassan, which made Cursed Wrist Hassan feel a little restrained. Just when Hassan the All-Seeing was about to say something, Cursed Wrist Hassan spoke before Hassan the All-Seeing could. I didn't know how to find the first Hassan. Cursed Wrist Hassan nodded. Seeing that Cursed Wrist Hassan spoke, Hassan the All-Seeing did not say anything else. In other words, as long as it's Hassan, he will definitely know this, Cursed Wrist Hassan continued. So, Hassan the All-Seeing also knows how to find the first Hassan? Gadotsi said, drawing inferences from one case. Yes, I can also find the first Hassan. Without any evasiveness or hesitation, Hassan the All-Seeing admitted it naturally. However, with Hassan the All-Seeing and Cursed Wrist Hassan's admission, The previous words of the first Hassan is difficult to find were a little bit of a slap in the face. As soon as they said that the first Hassan was difficult to find, Wuming revealed that cursed wrist Hassan could find the first Hassan, and Hassan, the all-seeing, admitted that she could do it too. This made Gadotsi and Matthew speechless. Maybe there's something that's hard to say. Gadotsi and Matthew thought so in their hearts. Then, why did Senior Villo only point out Mr. Cursed Wrist Hassan and not Ms. Hassan, the all-seeing? Matthew raised his hand and asked. The reason is simple. Cursed Wrist Hassan is a local, Wuming replied concisely. Gadotsi and Matthew could not understand this answer at all. Could it be that Hassan, the all-seeing, was not a local? The local that Villo said, I'm afraid he doesn't refer to this area, but to this era, Da Vinci said. Da Vinci is right, because Cursed Wrist Hassan is a person of this era. Gadotsi and Matthew looked at each other, then looked at Cursed Wrist Hassan. Mr. Cursed Wrist Hassan, you should be a servant, right? Although Matthew was not very powerful, he could almost perceive the identity of Cursed Wrist Hassan. There was no doubt that he was a servant. Whether it was the spiritual form or the combat power comparable to a servant, it was solid evidence. I'm indeed a servant, but this era is indeed my era, or the era not long after my death. However, Cursed Wrist Hassan did not understand one thing. How do you know about this? Cursed Wrist Hassan asked Wuming in a very respectful tone. Whether it was the powerful strength of Wuming that he heard from Gadotsi, or Wuming's ability to know Hassan's secret intelligence, Wuming was worthy of Cursed Wrist Hassan's respect. Wuming smiled slightly and answered Cursed Wrist Hassan's question. I know from the villagers. Cursed Wrist Hassan and all-seeing Hassan were stunned, and then they understood. So that's how it is. No wonder you have the assassin class adaptability. Even Da Vinci praised Wuming. However, not everyone understood, and there were still two people who did not understand. What the hell is going on? Don't keep us guessing, Gadotsi said unhappily. Only she and Matthew could not understand, and it was really uncomfortable. Cursed Wrist Hassan gave the answer. I'm afraid it's because of the villagers' conversation. Chapter 752. The villagers' conversation? What does that mean? Gadotsi was a little puzzled. Could it be that Wuming had tricked the villagers? Then, Wuming knocked her on the head. Ouch! Gadotsi shouted while holding her head. I'm not as bad as you think. Wuming explained. I only said that I accidentally heard about Cursed Wrist Hassan from the villagers when I was looking for Lucius. After all, the villagers did not have any entertainment facilities and were caught in the middle of a war. They could only chat to relieve their boredom. If the person he knew was powerful and kind, then there would be a lot of people talking about him. Wuming happened to hear something when he was looking for Lucius in the village. Through Wuming's own judgment and analysis, he came to the conclusion that Cursed Wrist Hassan was a local. I didn't ask at all. Wuming shrugged, indicating that he was innocent. However, Hundred Face Hassan did not believe it. I don't think you can guess Cursed Wrist's identity from the villagers' chatter. So she directly expressed her disbelief. However, there would always be someone who believed it. And if the person involved believed it, then the others would have nothing to say. No, Hundred Face, there is indeed such a possibility. Cursed Wrist shook his head at Hundred Face Hassan, denying his doubts. After that, Hundred Face Hassan did not say anything. Although she was a local, she was not from East Village where Cursed Wrist Hassan was from. As the host, Cursed Wrist Hassan was more right than she was. Cursed Wrist Hassan himself knew that the villagers would talk about him from time to time, and he had inadvertently overheard the content of the discussion a few times. So, he was not surprised that Wuming could guess his identity. So, it's much more convenient for Hassan of this generation to lead the team to look for the first Hassan than someone who is not from this generation, isn't it? Wuming said as he glanced at Hundred Face Hassan. Although Wuming didn't have much sarcasm in Hassan's eyes, Wuming's glance was quite sarcastic. Out of sight, out of mind, Hassan turned his head away from Wuming. Seeing this, Cursed Wrist Hassan also knowingly diverted everyone's attention to the topic. Then, Let me lead everyone to find the first Hassan. Hassan's body moved as if he wanted to say something, but after a slight struggle, he stopped. This was naturally reflected in Wu Ming's eyes. Coupled with Hundred Faces Hassan's hesitation and Cursed Wrist Hassan's concealment earlier, Wu Ming could tell that there must be something that was hard to say. Cursed Wrist Hassan, where can I find a first Hassan? What's the price? This question stunned everyone. The first point wasn't a big deal, but the second point was the key point. Generally speaking, this kind of thing was discovered by oneself. Why did Wu Ming ask directly? Sometimes, Wu Ming still wanted to be a straightforward person. After all, being a detective was very taxing on his brain cells. In the mountains to the north, there's a Yazril temple. It's the holy land of the Hassans. Legend has it that the first Hassan has been sleeping in the temple. Cursed Wrist Hassan said, and could not help but look to the north. Hassan also spoke at this moment. Although it's a legend, we firmly believe that the first Hassan is sleeping there, Hassan said respectfully. Wu Ming nodded and then changed the topic. So what's the price? Is it sacrificing the life of the current Hassan? Huh. Wu Ming's words made Gadatsi and Matthew exclaim in amazement. After all, the contrast was too great. To ask someone for help, one had to pay with one's life. Even if it was not one's own life, but someone else's life, in the eyes of Gadatsi and Matthew, this was not allowed. Is this true, Cursed Wrist Hassan? Gadatsi shouted Cursed Wrist Hassan's name with a serious expression. Because the leader of the old men in the mountains was Hassan Sabah, he could not be addressed as Hassan Sabah. After all, there were other Hassans. Therefore, Cursed Wrist Hassan said that it was fine to call himself Cursed Wrist Hassan. That was why Gadatsi called him that. Please tell us the truth, Mr. Cursed Wrist Hassan. As a polite and cute little eggplant, Matthew added honorifics. In desperation, Cursed Wrist Hassan could only nod. It's indeed as His Excellency Villos said. To seek the help of the first Hassan, one has to pay with the life of a Hassan, and that Hassan is me, the current Hassan. Is that really the case? Gadatsi was stunned. Then, how did Senior Villo know? Matthew looked at Wu Ming in confusion. I'm afraid it's because the first Hassan is the Hassan who killed Hassan. Da Vinci, who had been silent for a long time, spoke up. Da Vinci is right. In fact, you can understand it if you think about it carefully. Wu Ming nodded and motioned for Gadatsi and Matthew to think about it. The first Hassan would kill Hassan who had gone astray. If seeking the help of the first Hassan was considered going astray, then one Hassan would be killed. But the question was whether seeking the help of the first Hassan was going astray. Generally speaking, this should not be considered going astray. Matthew and Gadatsi thought so. However, the truth was sometimes so unexpected. Seeking the help of the first Hassan, in our opinion, is actually going astray. Hundred Faces Hassan regretfully stated the truth. If that's the case, if we seek the help of the first Hassan, wouldn't it be? Gadatsi said and looked at Cursed Wrist Hassan, who did not waver at all. Yes, we need to sacrifice Cursed Wrist Hassan. Hundred Faces Hassan nodded. This was also the reason why she hesitated before. In Hundred Faces Hassan's opinion, Wu Ming was already very powerful. It did not matter whether they sought the help of the first Hassan or not. However, Cursed Wrist Hassan had not seen Wu Ming's true ability, so when Wu Ming proposed to seek the help of the first Hassan, Cursed Wrist Hassan did not refuse. This is easy to handle. I have a way to solve this problem. Wu Ming smiled mysteriously. At this time, someone needed to make a statement. Gadatsi and Matthew looked at each other and nodded at the same time. We believe in the assassin, Senior Villo, the two said in unison. In that case, I'll believe in His Excellency Villo for once. Cursed Wrist Hassan chose to believe in Wu Ming, or rather, he chose to believe in the person that Chaldea's master trusted. I also want to see what the Villo has to do. Da Vinci naturally did not need to say much. In the end, only Hundred Faces Hassan was left. Since Cursed Wrist Hassan has said so, what else can I do? Hundred Faces Hassan nodded helplessly. Well, since the problem is solved, let's split up. Wu Ming nodded with satisfaction. Split up. 5 doubts filled everyone's mind. Chapter 753. Assassin. Do you mean you're not going to work with us? Gadotsi looked at Wuming with some grievance. Initially, they thought they could come together, but in the end, they still had to separate. I'm sorry, Tachika. I have to save Serenity Hassan, who was captured by the Holy City. After all, time is of the essence, so splitting up is the best choice. Wuming looked at Gadotsi apologetically. Serenity Hassan? Gadotsi repeated Wuming's words. She did not know there was this Hassan. Is that so? You've already asked Sir Villo to save Serenity, 100 Faces. Cursed Wrist Hassan suddenly realized. This is what I asked Mr. Villo to do when I was in my village. 100 Faces Hassan explained who Serenity Hassan was and told everyone about his inference that Serenity Hassan was still alive. Because we still have compatriots to take care of, plus the place where Serenity is at is heavily guarded, we dare not act rashly for a while. Listening to Cursed Wrist Hassan's words, it seemed that he and 100 Faces Hassan had already begun to formulate a plan to rescue Serenity. And it just so happened that 100 Faces Hassan met me, so he asked me to meet Serenity Hassan. Wuming did not mention the misunderstanding between him and 100 Faces Hassan. He just gave a simple ending. I see. Gadotsi wasn't an unreasonable girl, so he nodded his head in understanding. I know. I will definitely complete the mission you gave me, assassin. Assassin, you have to work hard on your side, too. She clenched her little fist and cheered for Wuming. Don't worry, I'm Villo there answered. Nothing will happen. Wuming reached out his hand and gave a thumbs up to Gadotsi in the void. Gadotsi also reached out her hand and gave a thumbs up in the void with a knowing smile. Then I'll leave it to you, Your Excellency Villo. I'll provide you with the specific information. Cursed Wrist Hassan thanked him. Okay, then I'll thank you in advance. Wuming nodded in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. Although he only needed to tell Wuming where the location was, Hassan also thought so he did not prepare any information for Wuming. However, since someone was willing to help, Wuming wouldn't refuse the other party's request, so he simply agreed. Then, I'll be in charge of rescuing Serenity Hassan. Tachika, Matthew, and Lucius will be in charge of going to the Yazril Temple with Cursed Wrist Hassan and Baijo Hassan. That's it. Wuming stood up and prepared to end the meeting. How sad. My dear Villo, are you going to abandon Da Vinci just like that? Da Vinci, who wasn't assigned a mission, complained. This made Wuming feel somewhat helpless. You're a caster, after all. It's better for you to stay here. Wuming smiled helplessly. And the villagers also need someone to protect them. If the servants leave, it'll be bad if there's any danger. For example, they will be discovered by the knights. After all, the West Village was still guarded by a Bonte, whom Gopral and Baijo Hassan didn't know about. As for the East Village, once they all left, then no one could provide protection for the villagers. Although Wuming would also let Azrael stay to protect the village secretly, Azrael was currently a secret chess piece, so he had to let one of her servants stay behind. Ah, I'm a genius. Maybe I can help. After all, climbing a mountain is very tiring. Tachika is just an ordinary human. She should need transportation, and it can also speed up. Da Vinci said a series of benefits for him to go. However, Cursed Wrist Hassan immediately refuted. Unfortunately, on the way to the Yazril Temple, you are not allowed to take transportation. That is disrespectful to the first generation. Even Da Vinci was stunned by Cursed Wrist Hassan's sudden slap in the face. The main reason was that the road between them was so rugged that many people who took transportation fell off the cliff and died because of instability. That was why this rule was extended. But if you don't want to take transportation, you can follow me. Cursed Wrist Hassan's words made Da Vinci react instantly. Okay, no problem. Da Vinci smiled and replied quickly. This made Wuming feel helpless. But Da Vinci didn't mind. It wouldn't affect him anyway, probably. In that case, I won't go. Mr. Villo is right. Someone has to stay behind to protect the villagers. So let me stay here to protect the villagers. At this time, Baijo Hassan suddenly spoke. After all, as long as it was Hassan, he would know where the Yazril Temple was, so only one Hassan was needed to lead everyone to the Yazril Temple. And if he was punished by the first Hassan, only cursed wrist Hassan, the current generation Hassan, would be punished. So it didn't matter if Baijio Hassan went or not. However, cursed wrist Hassan spoke once. You don't have to worry about that. There is another servant in this village. Cursed wrist Hassan reminded him. When cursed wrist Hassan said that, Baijio Hassan understood. I forgot about that person, because he didn't come here often and that person didn't appear in the village. Baijio Hassan forgot about him. That person? Who is it? Wuming was puzzled because he didn't find any other servant's magical power in the village, including now. Wuming released his spirit sense and covered the entire village. Except for the servants in this house, there were no other servants in the village. You can't perceive that person's magical power because he is not in the village, dear Villo. After all, it was Castor, and Da Vinci perceived Wuming's spirit sense. Not in the village. Wuming was relieved. In that case, it was not surprising that Wuming couldn't perceive the servant's aura. That person took some villagers to the mountains to hunt today, Gadotsi said with a smile. After all, there's not much food now. That person will take the villagers to the mountains from time to hunt. Matthew echoed. Although it was a war, there were still many wild animals in the mountains. However, because of the singularity, those beasts were fierce, so they needed servants to lead the team to hunt. So who was that person? Wuming didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This group of people just didn't say the servant's name. It was definitely a temporary idea to play with him. This was Wu Ming's judgment. In the end, it was the most honest cursed wrist Hassan who said the servant's real name. The servant's rank is Archer, and his real name is Arash Kamango, a great hero of the ancient Persian Empire. Chapter 754. Because he was acting alone, Wuming left first. Gadotsi and the others were going to wait for Arash, who went out to hunt with the villagers, to come back and explain before going out. So Gadotsi and the others stayed in the village. Between the mountains, Wuming used his telekinesis to fly in the air and headed south. After leaving East Village for some distance, Wuming found a mountaintop similar to a cliff and stopped. I remember that Arash is a hero who can tear the earth with an arrow, but the price seems to be the shattering of his body. Wuming thought about the information of the great hero along the way. Although Wuming could also wait for Arash to come back and meet him before leaving, there was no need for that. After all, there would be opportunities in the future. Thinking of opportunities, Wuming thought of Smoky Drunk Hassan. His first meeting with Smoky Drunk Hassan was the last meeting. At that time, Wuming also thought that there was still a chance. I'm not a jinx. Wuming shook his head self-deprecatingly. As a matter of fact, it was inevitable for Smoky Drunk Hassan to make such a decision. It was a pity that he could not see him again. Wuming had a good impression of Hassan, who was willing to sacrifice his life to stall Tristan. However, the other party had left. Wuming shook his head and stopped thinking about it. Then, he looked in the direction of the cliff. He sent someone there. Azriel. After Wuming said that, an angel floated up from the bottom of the cliff. It's me, Master. The newcomer was naturally the green-haired Azriel. Azriel's special skill played a big role. So far, she had not shown any signs of losing her mind. It seemed that the ability of the Skywing commander brought about resistance to the violent power. Azriel bowed her head respectfully, her wings half spread, and floated in the air, but her body was one position lower than Wuming. You've worked hard, Azriel. You've completed the task I gave you very well. After all, she was his subordinate, and she was also a cute girl. Wuming naturally wouldn't be stingy with his praise. Master, are you blaming me for not saving that smoke-drunk Hassan? Azriel suddenly asked. Wuming shook his head. The death of a servant is not a real death, and you did it to complete my mission. You did the right thing. Therefore, Wuming did not overreact to the death of drunk Smoke Hassan. Moreover, Azriel's actions proved that she was completely under Wuming's command. She would not try to act smart, which was similar to the NPCs in Nazalek. However, being too loyal and inflexible was also what gave Wuming a headache. Of course, I hope you could try to be flexible. When Wuming left Dongji village, he got a lot of information from drunk Smoke Hassan about a prison tower that imprisoned Tranquil Hassan. However, when handing over the information, Wuming inadvertently heard a sentence from cursed Wrist Hassan. It would be great if Smoke Drunk didn't leave. Her stealth ability is the best among us, Hassan. It was no wonder that drunk Smoke Hassan chose to sneak into the holy city. It was not arrogance, but the truth. Although the ending was that he took the initiative to expose himself and sacrificed himself to cover the refugees. At that time, Wuming actually wanted to complain. Why did drunk Smoke Hassan always want to sacrifice himself to cover others' escape? Ahem, back to the topic. If Azrael saved drunk Smoke Hassan at that time, then they would have one more stealth expert to help them. Of course, I'm not blaming you. I just hope you don't lose the right to think for yourself, because you want to fully express your loyalty. Servants who needed to be loyal to a new master would generally fully obey the master's orders in order to gain the master's trust. However, there was no need for that. He believed in the loyalty of the Skywing species. A person who was loyal enough to listen to the master's orders and indirectly killed her master, and it was done knowingly. One could imagine the loyalty of the Skywing species. Azrael did think so, and she was afraid that Wuming could not see that she wanted to show her loyalty, so she deliberately showed it. I still prefer to talk to Gabriel. I like partners more than servants. Although Gabriel also gave her loyalty to Wuming, she was more casual in front of Wuming than Azrael. Well, my master, I will change, meow. Azrael flapped her wings, smiled at Wuming, and put on her quirky tone again. Then, please continue to stay here, whether in Dongji village or with Tachika and the others. This time, Wuming only gave a vague order, and it was up to Azrael to decide what to do. Master, don't you need me to go with you to carry out the rescue plan, meow? Azrael asked with concern. Although she knew that Wuming would be fine if he went alone and would definitely succeed, how could she be lazy and let her master do things for her? It's too extravagant for the two of us to go. Just complete the task I gave you. After all, Wuming was not someone who cared about his reputation. He was not someone who would let his subordinates do things first. In Wuming's opinion, splitting up to act was the most time-saving. Yes, master. May I know what little Kishi is doing now, meow? Azrael flew in front of Wuming. Although she let go, she still did not lose the respect she should have. I ordered her to monitor and protect Dongji village with a bond, Wuming answered truthfully. Protecting the village is boring. Little Kishi is probably bored out of her wits, meow. Azrael laughed gloatingly. I'm not going to stay in the village. I'm going with those monkeys, humans, to meet that first Hassan. Meow, every Skywing had a restless heart, and Azrael was no exception. But be careful. While you weren't around, the first Hassan infiltrated a bot, Wuming reminded her. Master, did that first Hassan hurt you? Azrael was rather nervous. After all, in her opinion, it was her incompetence for someone to infiltrate the headquarters while she was away. After all, she was the commander of the Skywings. If her mistress was hurt, then Azrael would not tolerate it even more. I'm fine with some minor injuries, but he's not someone you can deal with, so you must be careful. Wuming looked at Azrael gravely, afraid that the first Hassan would cut down Azrael's violent temper. After all, Azrael was a berserker. Although she was not that irritable, Azrael was still easily irritable. Taking a deep breath, Azrael calmed down. Understood, master. I'll be flying high up in the sky. I'll be very cautious, meow, smiling and bowing to Wuming. Azrael flapped her wings and flew into the sky. Then, I should be going. Wuming had not been idle while chatting with Azrael. He had been using his psychic power to explore the path ahead, and he had already reached the vicinity of the prison tower. Extending his psychic power there meant that Wuming had been there, so the teleportation gate could be used. With that, Wuming snapped his fingers, and a dark purple ripple engulfed Wuming. Only the sound of the wind blowing through the mountain crevices could be heard. There was no one in sight. Chapter 755. Night gradually fell, and the stars surged into the sky. The moonlight tonight was not very good, and the moon was somewhat obscured by large dark clouds. On the barren land without moonlight, there was not the slightest vitality, no plants, no animals. All of it was lifeless soil, or the land that was hard and cold like iron. On this steel-like land, a black facility shaped like a prison castle was located here. The black walls merged with the dark night as if rooted in the darkness, and complemented the steel-like barren land. On the castle, mass-produced solemn knights were holding torches, patrolling the walls, monitoring the surroundings, and basically every blind spot had a solemn knight standing guard. Through the light of the fire, it could be seen that the solemn knights were all fully armed to the head, and the serious and somewhat ugly helmets could not let others see their faces clearly. The same type of armor, plus their orderly patrolling, standing guard, and changing shifts, if one only looked at the appearance, it really looked like mass-produced. And mass-produced also had its advantages. That was, there would not be many accidents, and the fact was indeed so. So far, no accidents had happened here, even when the sky was dark to this extent. But this stability was about to be broken at this moment. In a corner, two knights were changing shifts. The knight who changed shifts left, and the knight who changed shifts replaced the knight who left and stood guard there. After the knight who changed shifts walked away, the knight who changed shifts fell straight back as if he had fainted. If he fell, the sound of armor hitting the ground would definitely attract the attention of others. But Wu Ming would not let this happen. Wu Ming, who was hiding in the shadow behind the unconscious knight, held the knight who was stunned by his magic release, gently lifted him, put him in the shadow of the blind spot, and gently put him on the ground. Then, Wu Ming pointed in the air, and the high-level tool creation skill was activated. A black cloth appeared out of thin air and covered the knight on the ground. Because it was a blind spot, plus the shadow and Wu Ming's black cloth as a cover, it was basically impossible to be discovered. "Now, I'm going to sneak in," Wu Ming said, and a black cloak like Hassan appeared on Wu Ming's body. From now on, he would sneak in. It could only be said that there was still a shortage of manpower, and at least two knights should be arranged in a blind spot. However, there was only one solemn knight standing guard in the corner of the castle. Wasn't this giving Wu Ming an opportunity to take advantage of? At first, Wu Ming, who arrived not far from the prison castle through the portal, began to explore all kinds of intelligence about the prison castle. First of all, there was no enchantment around the prison castle, so Wu Ming easily slipped up the wall, and he was ready to sneak from the top. After hiding for a while, Silent Wonder figured out how the knights would change shifts. After that knight finished changing shifts, Silent Wonder knocked out the knight and replaced him as the night sentry. According to Wu Ming's observation, the guard in this blind spot changed every half an hour. In other words, from now on, no one would pay attention to this place for at least half an hour. In other words, Wu Ming had half an hour to do whatever he wanted. Then, it was time for Wu Ming to sneak in. After waiting for a while to make sure that this blind spot would not be noticed by others, Wu Ming did not stay any longer. Wu Ming directly used the high-level tool creation to create a puppet with only the appearance of the solemn knight, and the real solemn knight would not wake up for a while. Wu Ming was merciful that the guy was not shocked to death by the magic released. Without a few hours or intense stimulation, the guy would not wake up. After finishing the preparation, Wu Ming put on the black cloak and quietly left along the wall of the building. After all, there was only one entrance to the lower level, so Wu Ming naturally knew where to go. Avoiding the patrolling solemn knight, Wu Ming quietly entered from the entrance of the tower and came to a corridor that could lead to the lower level of the castle. In order to avoid being blocked in the corridor, Wu Ming used his mental power to support the soles of his feet and ran through the corridor without making the slightest sound. Because of the chaos, it was impossible for the holy city to have many people. Plus, this location was remote, so there were not many people inside the castle. At least, this was what Wu Ming saw so far. At least Wu Ming did not see many solemn knights along the way. Even if he did, Wu Ming could rely on his own skills to avoid them. It had to be said that the construction of this prison castle was exactly the same as the prison castle in Camelot. Wooming even felt like he was back at home. Cough, cough. In short, Wooming knew his destination, where was the prison room where the prisoners were kept. After all, he was also a knight of the Round Table. Soon, Wooming came to an entrance to the lower level. Hiding in the corner, Wooming saw two solemn knights holding spears at the entrance. In front of him was the entrance where the prisoners were detained. If it was in this castle, then Quiet Hassan would be in the prison room at this entrance. After finding Quiet Hassan, Wooming could rely on the portal to save her. So, it was better to be reckless now. Wooming picked up a stone and threw it in the opposite direction where he was. The two solemn knights looked over subconsciously. At this moment, the mental power attached to the soles of his feet burst out suddenly. Wooming rushed to the two solemn knights like a missile. The two solemn knights obviously realized that something was wrong, and they also saw someone attacking them, but their body's reaction speed could not keep up with their thoughts. Wooming, who rushed to the front of the two knights in an instant, pressed his hands on the heads of the two solemn knights, and magic power suddenly released. What? Before one of the knights could finish speaking, he was stunned by Wooming's magic power. The other solemn knight, who did not have time to speak, naturally fainted earlier. Wooming threw the two solemn knights casually, and the two solemn knights were swallowed by the black and purple ripples. In one corner, the black and purple ripples spat out the two and piled them together like garbage. Looking at the adults in the prison room, Wooming gently patted the non-existent dust on his hands. After all, there was no need to be careful. Moreover, Wooming did not feel that this door was safe. On the contrary, this door was probably the most dangerous place in this prison castle. With one hand extended, the spear of the unconscious solemn knight was sucked into the palm of Wooming's hand with his mental power. Wooming held the spear and aimed at the door, and magic began to gather on this ordinary spear. Then, the spear was thrown out by Wooming. Whoosh boom! The entire prison castle shook violently. Chapter 756. Boom! The entire prison tower shook because of Wooming's throw. The solemn knights on the tower panicked a little, although there was no commander to command them. After a moment of panic, the solemn knights automatically gathered in an orderly manner and headed toward the source of the tremor, the prison in the castle. At the door of the prison room, Wooming pondered and picked up the broken stone that splashed at his feet. A magic shielding enchantment. Wooming saw the traces of a magic enchantment attached to the broken stone. Attached to these walls were enchantments that could completely shield magic. Although this enchantment was very ordinary, it was very practical. However, this enchantment was said to shield magic, but it was more like hiding magic. When setting up a magic trap or something with this enchantment, the enemy would not be able to detect the magic on the magic trap, and thus would not be able to discover the trap. Of course, to deal with a magician, non-magic traps could also be set up. To put it simply, it was a trap created by the knowledge brought about by the development of science and technology. However, such a trap was basically useless against people like Wooming, although magic traps were unlikely to work against Wooming. However, this magic shielding enchantment was not used to hide the trap. The other party knew that the trap would not be able to do anything to Wooming, so this enchantment was used to hide the person hiding in the prison room. Wooming casually threw away the broken stone in his hand and then looked at the smashed door. The door was completely broken, and even the walls around the door had a lot of cracks. The broken stone that splashed at Wooming's feet was part of this broken wall. Wooming's throw accurately hit the target he wanted to hit. Although this blow caused a lot of smoke, and the situation inside could not be seen clearly, Wooming did not need to see clearly. After breaking the door, Wooming extended his mental strength to see the situation inside. A large number of fully armed solemn knights, and a knight of the Round Table that Wooming was familiar with agronomy. This was what the other party was hiding. A fully armed, battle-hardened solemn knight, as well as a knight of the Round Table, Iron Agronomy. Unlike the solemn knights on the tower outside, the armor and weapons of these solemn knights were attached to magic. If these things were called magic attire in the magic world, it would be a very advanced magic attire. Is this Guinevere's work? Not to mention that Wu Ming could recognize these things that were transformed by Guinevere among the Knights of the Round Table. Only Merlin, Guinevere, and Morgan were high-grade magicians. Morgan and Merlin were not here, only Guinevere was here. These magic attires undoubtedly came from Guinevere's work. Although Guinevere was a berserker, it was not impossible for him to read as a berserker and write as a caster. Even Soundless was able to read Saber's assassin and infiltrate berserker. So what else was impossible? In Wu Ming's view, even Ramses' too sudden betrayal was possible. That was why Wu Ming asked Gadotsi and the others to invite the first Hassan. When Wu Ming was distracted, the sound of arrows piercing through the atmosphere came into Wu Ming's ears. Shaking his head, he pulled himself back from the distraction. Wu Ming stretched out one hand, and the meteor silver was spat out from the golden ripples and fell into Wu Ming's hand. Wu Ming held it tightly. Then, Wu Ming swung his sword violently, and a magic sword aura swept across and shot down all the arrows from the prison room. By the way, Wu Ming's sword aura also blew away the surrounding smoke and dust. Wu Ming saw the inside of the prison room. This door was just the main door, and there was a very empty hall inside. There was a wide corridor inside, and there were rows of prisons where prisoners were held. Wu Ming was not familiar with this structure. It must have been remodeled when the prison castle was built. The purpose was obvious. That was Wu Ming's current situation. A row of knights with bow and arrow magic attire lined up in the hall, maintaining the posture of bow and arrow. There was no doubt that the attack just now was launched by them. In the back row, there was a team of knights with spears, and all of them were also wearing high-level magic attire. Behind them, there was a Gwaun in black armor, and a row of knights with a knight's greatsword. Similarly, those knights' greatsword were also magic attire. Although it was completely incomparable with Wu Ming's meteor silver, it was already a very powerful weapon for ordinary servants or humans. There is no doubt that those troops, led by a Gwaun, were a team of special forces. After all, even Guinevere couldn't always make magic attire for the knights, so those magic attire were very small. At least Wu Ming didn't see them in the sacred city. Although there was also the possibility that they were hidden, Wu Ming believed that this was a special force. If it was an ordinary servant, after dealing with the guard knights, they would definitely enter the prison to save people. In that case, the first wave of arrows just now was likely to be unstoppable. Of course, if you had a blood-stained armor, an invincible golden armor, an immortal demigod body, or something like that, you could naturally resist the attack. However, Wu Ming didn't go in at all. The number of people in the prison castle was pitifully small, and the defense was very similar to a trap. How could there not be an ambush? If someone didn't know about the Knights of the Round Table, they might think that the number of people patrolling the castle was quite normal. But as a member of the Knights of the Round Table, Wu Ming had already seen that something was wrong. He didn't know about other knights, but among the Knights of the Round Table, Wu Ming knew that the prison was not strictly guarded, but it was impossible to arrange such a number of people. What's more, there were servants here. Even if the terrain was remote, it was impossible to send so many people. Therefore, only by setting up an ambush, in Wu Ming's view, was the most correct answer. However, that was just Wu Ming's guess, but the javelin just now proved that what he thought was correct. He didn't know whether Gwaun got the news or guessed that someone would come to save people. Anyway, he had already set up an ambush in advance. If it was Hassan, maybe he would be buried under the special force. But unfortunately, the person who came today was Wu Ming. Vilo Theranciad, a Gwaun frowned. Through his expression, Wu Ming could see that he really didn't expect the person who came was Wu Ming. In other words, the information collected by Hassan was actually deliberately leaked by Gwaun, waiting for Hassan to fall into the trap. Again, it was Wu Ming who came today. As a result, Gwaun's plan was completely disrupted. Chapter 757. It was not that Wu Ming was bragging. Even if these knights were equipped with the powerful magic attire made by Guinevere, they were still no match for Wu Ming. Learning martial arts from the Queen of the Infernal Realm, honing his martial arts skills for more than 10 years, or even decades, as well as powerful noble phantasm and unimaginable magic power, Aguin and his special troops were nothing more than decorations. If it were not for the fact that Wu Ming did not know if the target he needed to rescue this time, Quiet Hassan, was there, Wu Ming would definitely use the meteor silver to launch a light cannon. In that case, these solemn nights would basically be finished. It cannot be helped. A sealed hall with an opening was like a secret room, and if Wu Ming released his noble phantasm at the opening, it was equivalent to a bomb exploding in the secret room. Wu Ming's bomb was not an ordinary bomb. If Wu Ming completely released his noble phantasm, it would be a bomb on the level of a nuclear bomb. The result would be that the prison castle would be directly shattered, and not even dregs would be left. However, Wu Ming did not know if the target he needed to rescue this time was still in the prison castle, so Wu Ming would not do that. Moreover, Wu Ming sneaked in, so how could he make such a big movement like a nuclear bomb explosion? Wu Ming looked at Aguin's appearance, and it did not seem like he was going to turn a blind eye. However, after all, both of them were once colleagues of the Round Table, so Wu Ming would not immediately make a move. I didn't expect to see you here, Aguin. Wu Ming took the lead in greeting. When the solemn knights saw Wu Ming greeting their commander, they all looked at each other. It was someone they knew, so should they still attack? The king's order has already been issued. Villotharanst is the enemy. You don't have to hold back, Aguin said with a gloomy face. The solemn knights did not know Wu Ming, so they did not have any definite feeling about Wu Ming's identity as a former knight of the Round Table. Therefore, after Aguin gave the order, the solemn knights at the forefront with bows and arrows immediately released their fully drawn bows and arrows. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The arrows cut through the air and rushed at Wu Ming at an extremely fast speed. However, all of this was useless. Wu Ming just gently waved his sword, and all the arrows that attacked Wu Ming were all deflected. Tisk, Aguin gritted his teeth and frowned. He naturally knew that these solemn knights were no threat to Wu Ming, but he still did not want to give up, because he was unwilling. All of you stand down. But what could he do? If this continued, these special solemn knights would be completely annihilated. And as long as they did not attack Wu Ming, according to Aguin's understanding of Wu Ming, he would not attack. The solemn knights completely obeyed Aguin's order and immediately stood up and retreated. However, Aguin did not move. But it was clear that he did not want to sit down and have a good talk with Wu Ming, because Aguin pulled out his sword. There was no doubt that the solemn knights could not deal with Wu Ming, so Aguin was ready to personally attack. The solemn knights were a special force trained by Aguin to deal with servants. They could not be defeated by Wu Ming, so Aguin chose to let them retreat. But he could not retreat because Aguin's anger toward Wu Ming was burning fiercely. It seems that you are not ready to have a good talk with me. Wu Ming shook his head regretfully. Although it was futile for Aguin to personally attack, not to mention that Aguin's face was full of anger at the moment. But as a knight, Wu Ming respected Aguin's choice. So Wu Ming also raised his sword, meteor silver. Without saying much, Aguin made the first move. It was a powerful slash, which gave people the feeling that Aguin was not a knight, but a berserker. Wu Ming received the attack. Aguin's attack was indeed powerful, but Wu Ming was stronger. However, Wu Ming did not attack, but used meteor silver to constantly defend. Bang, bang, bang. Aguin held his sword and kept attacking. Wu Ming used meteor silver to constantly defend. One moved forward, the other moved backward. The two swords collided with each other and made a sound. What made you so angry, Aguin? Wu Ming asked while defending. Of course it's you. Villotharanst. Aguin roared, raised his sword and slashed at Wu Ming with more force than before. Clang! The sound of metal colliding rose by dozens of decibels, and Wu Ming felt a little uncomfortable. On the other hand, Aguin's ear was slightly bleeding. Whether it's guy, Gaholes, Maranduk, or Percival. They can all betray the king, but only you, the king's closest knight, Villotharanst. Only you can't betray the king. Aguin seemed a little crazy at this moment, like a berserker. You are the one who has been with the king since the beginning. The person the king needs the most is none other than you. But you betrayed the king. Aguin's mind was becoming more and more abnormal. His words were filled with respect for Wuming, but also resentment for Wuming. Wuming sighed. He understood why Aguin became like this. Artoria was indeed the first person that a groupin got close to, and he was greatly influenced by her. However, because he was a modern person, he showed a lot of advanced ideas. Therefore, Wuming's influence on a groupin was also great. Aguin was extremely loyal to Artoria, but he also admired Wuming. As everyone knew, the Knights of the Round Table were fans of Artoria, but at the same time, they were also fans of Wuming or Villotharanst. The other Knights of the Round Table were very obvious, but there were also some who were not. Aguin was such an example. However, if he had to choose between Wuming and Artoria, Aguin would undoubtedly choose Artoria's side. But this did not mean that he could turn a blind eye to the person he admired, especially when that person was the person the king he was loyal to needed. And now, the two people he admired and believed in were standing on opposite sides. How could he not go crazy? You need to calm down, Aguin, Wuming said. After all, they were good friends who had worked together for many years. Wuming naturally cared about the Knights of the Round Table. Aguin's eyes were bloodshot, and his ears were bleeding. He roared at Wuming, "I am calm. Those who are not loyal to the king are traitors. Even if it's Lord Varen, I'll kill him for you to see." With that, Aguin rushed forward again. Seeing Aguin like this, Wuming did not say anything. Now, he could only defeat him. Chapter 758. Exsliver. Following the activation of True Name release, the blade of Meteor Silver glowed with a pure silver light. The huge amount of magic power caused the solemn knights not far away to feel fear. The mana released from his body was instantly compressed and condensed on the holy sword. Like a flash bomb, no one could look directly at it. Wuming swung the holy sword horizontally at Egwalin, who was attacking him. Light flashed, and Egwalin's knight's sword shattered. Even Agroin's armor was completely shattered. Egwalin coughed out blood and half-knelt in front of Wuming. Wuming did not kill Egwalin. He could not and did not need to. Wuming also half-knelt and looked at Egwalin. "If I accept Artoria's summon, you will lose. I will lead Guy and the others to defeat Artoria." Wuming looked at Egwalin with bloodshot eyes and messy hair. He looked like he was about to die. Ahem. Egwalin was a little agitated by Wuming and coughed twice. Egwalin understood what Wuming meant. He was saying that it was unwise for Egwalin to fight him alone. Wuming was the strongest among the Knights of the Round Table. Although Gawain and Lancelot could fight against Wuming, they were still no match for him. No matter in terms of strength, speed, durability, or magic power, the other Knights of the Round Table were no match for Wuming, who was the Origin Dragon. Although it didn't have any obvious advantages, the Origin Dragon gave Wuming an inconspicuous change that transcended nature. However, Wuming's words also implied that he would drag Artoria down from the Lion King's throne. "I didn't try to kill you, but you can't fight right now. You should take a good rest." Wuming stood up and walked around Agroin. When Wuming arrived behind Egwalin, Egwalin suddenly spoke. "Wait a minute." Due to his weak state, Egwalin could not turn his head. He could only lower his head and ask. Wuming turned around and looked at Egwalin. "Lord Villo, why do you want to make an enemy out of my king?" However, Wuming only smiled at this. "I never said that I want to be Artoria's enemy. I just don't want Artoria to walk on a difficult path." In her current form, Artoria chose to preserve the human specimens and destroy the villains for the sake of mankind. No matter the Knights of the Round Table, such as Guy, who chose to stand against Artoria, or the Knights of the Round Table who chose to stand on Artoria's side, As a knight, they were against the idea of eliminating the majority and protecting the minority. However, the knights who chose to stand on Artoria's side, such as Gawain, did so out of loyalty. Compared to protecting the people, serving the king and making up for their regrets was a better choice. Therefore, King Arthur's Knights of the Round Table became the Lion King's Knights of the Round Table. Purely from a perspective of protecting the people, Artoria chose the right path. However, Wuming had a better choice. This choice was better for both Artoria and the people. Helping Chaldea and restoring the people was Wuming's choice. The path of saving the people was finished by him. There was no need for Artoria to bear the burden. If there was a happy ending, why would he choose the path of bad end? Therefore, Wuming stood on the opposite side of the Lion King as an ally. Didn't you say that the person Artoria needs the most is me? Therefore, I will never betray her. I just chose to walk on the path of betrayal in your eyes. However, more importantly, Wuming had to find out what Artoria was hiding from him. Of course, the premise of all this was that Ramses II did not lie. By the way, the new force is mine. Soon, we will launch an attack on the Holy City. Be prepared, Agronomen. After saying that, Wuming walked into the prison. As for Agronomen, after hearing Wuming's words, he fainted and lay on the ground. The knights were afraid of Wuming because of Wuming's previous performance. In addition, their commander, Agronomen, had fainted. Therefore, the knights did not move. They were even a little scared. Seeing such knights, Wuming shook his head helplessly. Send Agronomen back to the Holy City. Tell him that you met me. The Lion King will not blame you. Yes, the knights responded. Then, they carried the unconscious Agronomen and hurriedly left in the direction of the gate. Wuming shook his head again. He was disappointed with these knights. Although it was irrational to fight against an enemy who was obviously unbeatable, listening to Wuming, who seemed to be an enemy at the moment, was there something wrong? However, Wuming did not think too much about it. What he needed to do now was to save Quiet Hassan. Walking to the prison corridor, Wuming did not find anyone in the cells on both sides of the corridor, but after thinking about it carefully, the villains must have been killed. Judging from a magic emitted by the prison facilities here, it was estimated that this place was only used to imprison servants. I forgot to ask where Quiet Hassan is. Wuming made a mistake. However, the felons should be in the innermost part. With that in mind, Wuming walked to the deepest part of the prison corridor. A two-person tall door appeared in front of Wuming. Without hesitation, Wuming pushed the door and walked in. As soon as he entered, he saw a huge cylindrical pit, but the depth of the huge pit was not high, but the diameter was quite long. A stone staircase spiraled down the edge of the huge pit. It seemed to be a staircase leading to the bottom. However, because it was not deep, Wuming saw the bottom at a glance. In the center of the bottom, a wooden cross stood there, which was used to tie people up. On the cross, a scarred body was hung on it. It was a purple-haired girl wearing a tight black suit and a skull mask. That should be Quiet Hassan. Wuming thought so. With a light leap, Wuming jumped down from the huge pit and landed steadily in front of Quiet Hassan. Quiet Hassan did not move at all, but Wuming was still keenly aware that a gaze was looking at him, but it immediately moved away. Wuming looked at his armor. He was afraid that Quiet Hassan thought he was a knight of the Holy City. He touched the armor and changed into ordinary Middle Eastern clothes. Then Wuming spoke. I'm here to save you on Hassan's request. After Wuming finished speaking, Quiet Hassan's eyes lit up. Later, Wuming waved the meteor silver, and the chain wrapped around Quiet Hassan broke, and Quiet Hassan fell from the cross. Wuming subconsciously reached out and hugged Quiet Hassan. However, at this moment, Quiet Hassan squeezed out a trace of strength and spoke weakly. No, you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.